Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. This is a meeting of the Gloucester School Committee. I will say that the mission for Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. We are going into executive session for the purpose of pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining with the SBC, new supervisors and crossing guards, and we'll return to open session at approximately 7 p.m. So anybody who may have joined us at 6:30, we will be back at this place at 7 p.m. See you then. Someone want to make a motion to go in executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Minio,
No, yes.
Ms. Texera Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
and Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
Have to find the link.
Yeah, well, you shared it, didn't you? You shared it.
Oh,
Okay.
We good?
okay.
Good evening again, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. We are now continuing our school committee meeting in,
Mute or turn off the speakers.
I think we good? We all good?
Next up.
Okay. So we're continuing our meeting in the, in open session. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during the oral communications to be recognized to speak. I'll say that again, the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. We will all hopefully join me to stand and salute the flag. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, oral communications is the next item of business, and I just want to say we will be getting a presentation, a report from the superintendent on the new information from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education during the superintendent's report. So we will hold public comment on that topic until after that presentation, hoping that anybody who has questions or comments will take that information into account into what they may comment. If they have questions, maybe those questions get answered for them prior to during this public comment session. So that being said, is there anybody who wants to speak on a topic other than masks required in our school? You would need to raise your hand, and I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand. Okay, but we have a lot of attendees. Thank you for joining us this evening. We definitely have many people watching our meeting tonight. Next item of business is recognitions. Does anybody have? Okay, Laura.
I want to recognize Laura LaBianca, the founder and head of Backyard Growers, who announced that she's retiring. She and her organization have brought an incredible wealth of activities and information and support for our students. and for the whole community. And I want to really recognize her and Backyard Growers.
I just want to recognize the swim team at the high school. I know they've had some recent successes, and it's just a newer program that continues to grow, and they should be very proud.
Yeah, I think a couple years ago, 2 years, more than a couple, but swim and wrestling and girls ice hockey, those programs have really blossomed. And they're doing well, and I'm sure the kids are all really happy that they can participate in those programs. Okay. Next, we have our Gloucester High School Student Advisory Council, and we have Jenna Smith with us this evening. Thank you, Jenna, for coming.
Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah, okay.
We can hear you, but if you could speak a little louder, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Is that a little better?
Perfect.
Okay, get comfortable because like I have a lot of things to share with you guys. So if you want to go grab some popcorn or something, that'll be cool. I'll wait. First off, I do want to apologize because the exec board hasn't been here for a bit. Life of a senior is getting a little crazy with college apps and sports and work and all that. But hopefully we'll be back more regularly now. So that'll be good. So NHS induction for new inductees is next month on March 21st. With all like the really bad weather that we've been having, the current members of NHS, they've been doing really good getting in their community service hours because they've been able to like shovel and just help out their neighbors and stuff, which has been great. Valentine's Day is next week. We all know that. The junior class is selling candy grams, and they've been selling them just like little bags of candy. I think you can get one for like a small bag for $1 or a big bag for $5. They're doing pretty well on that. There is a big DECA competition coming up too. And unfortunately for the DECA students that are going to that competition, it's very expensive. So they're trying to organize some fundraisers. They're going to try and get an Azorian night soon. So like watch out for that because that'd be great to help them out so that they can go and stay in a hotel and all that fun stuff. For the yearbook, they're also fundraising. They have a budget that they have to meet in order to produce the book. And I'm in the yearbook staff and it's actually coming along really great, but we still need to sell those books. So if you know any students at GHS, promote the yearbook and tell them to buy the books. But in addition to that, we're going to have a night at Minglewood and we're going to hopefully host that next week. So stay tuned for that too. What else do we have? Oh, last week we took superlative pictures for the yearbook and we have a contract and we have to use Prestige as our photographer in like all the pictures. And the photographer had a mix up, so they weren't able to come the day and time that they were scheduled to. And it was really great because the students had like worked together and like Kiara O'Connor, I don't know if you guys know her. She took photo as one of her classes at the school and she was able to take all the pictures and they turned out amazing. And so that's really great. And like the whole yearbook staff worked together really well for that. Next week is Secret Pal Week. So everyone on student council and NHS, they're assigned 1 or 2 teachers. And every day for the week, they get to bring them like a little gift or like do a favor for them. And the teacher doesn't know who it is until the very like next Friday when like we reveal like, hey, like I'm your secret pal. But like throughout the week, like you can give little hints. So like for I have 2 teachers. So for them, I'll be like, I'm a girl, I'm a senior, I do these extracurricular activities or something like that. So that's always a fun thing to do. And then Footloose is our musical this spring. I wish I could tell you guys like the date of like when like the debut is, but I really don't know. But I have seen them rehearsing in the auditorium and it looks and sounds great. So stay up with that because I know that I'm going to be buying tickets right away. And I think that you guys all should too, because they're working really hard. And then finally, I love Secret Pals. Sorry, I just want to say that again. But I love them. They're so fun. I know Miss Menery loves them. All the teachers love them. They're so fun to do. And soccer game, not soccer. Soccer already happened. Hockey game. This Saturday, there's a hockey game at O'Malley, and I think we should all go and support the hockey team because those are always really fun games. And that's all I have for you guys.
Anyone have any questions? No? Jen, I have a question. You mentioned that the National Honor Society students are helping with some shoveling. How do you know who could use some help, or how do you connect people with people that have a need?
Right now, people have kind of just been like helping out people that they know. But if someone needs help shoveling, they could always reach out to either, I know Sophia Costa is the president of NHS, so you could reach out to her, or just any student in the high school. Like if someone needs help, reach out to the student in the high school, have them contact an NHS member, because most people know who's on NHS and who isn't. And if they don't know, there's a big poster board on the first floor near the stairs. Like you can look and like the names are posted, but it's kind of just like communicate to people who you know, and we can always find a way to help out people who need help shoveling.
Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Shauna, when is the Azorian night for the DEFA team? Any idea on that?
I don't have a set date yet, but I know that they're trying to do it as soon as possible.
Okay.
They don't have a set date, so they're probably going to be posting it on social media and getting the word out as soon as they're able to finalize a date.
Got it. Thank you.
If you want to, if somebody wants to send that information to the school committee, we can post it on our Facebook page as well. And then as members, it would be great to know the dates. All right. Anything else? Thank you very much for being here.
Shauna?
Thank you.
Good night. Okay. All right, so we will move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items anybody would like to remove from the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda. Second.
Okay. All right, Maria, do roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minion,
Yes.
Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
and Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda is approved. So we are moving on to deliberations on educational issues. And we are sticking with the order of our agenda because we have a wonderful report from our special education director who joined us this summer, Katie Provost. And we're excited to hear about your view of what's going on in special education and the information you have to present. And you have a very full audience. And thankfully, a lot of families will be able to hear what we're doing in special education as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Before Katie goes, if you don't mind me just saying a couple of things. I'm excited if you are for Director of Special Education, Katie Provo, to be here tonight to help us understand what she's been learning from all of our special education staff and our teachers and school leaders. And also it's sort of to identify some priorities. First, and just really pleased about the decision that the hiring committee made in hiring Katie. Katie brings to us a bunch of real strengths. First, she has a really deep understanding of high quality special education practices and instruction. She matches that with a really deep understanding of the laws and regulation, which guide and really sort of sort of give us the guide rails on special education. It's an area that is very heavily regulated and legalized, and sort of have her combination of both instructional knowledge and practice knowledge, as well as the regulations and laws, is very powerful. She also brings to it a really deep and abiding interest in understanding data and what our data is telling us about our students, and matching that with classroom practice. And the final, I guess, two more things, if you don't mind going on and on. A really great sense of collaboration between special education and general education, which is very powerful, and you'll hear a lot about that tonight. as well as just a very collaborative spirit as well. So really pleased that Katie's with us, really pleased with the direction she's going to be leading us, and that's what you'll hear about tonight. I will do the presentation.
Thank
I will
you.
click.
Okay,
Give me a moment to get it set up, and then we'll go.
Thank you for that introduction, Ben. I'm very happy to be here.
All yours.
So welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me. My goal tonight is to give you an update from the department with really kind of my vision of where I see the department going, what the priorities are, and what our strengths are in the department, and then reviewing some data. So some things that I've learned since I started, and as well as some data that we've been looking at really to help drive where our priorities are going. And then from there, we'll go into what the priorities are for the strategic plan going forward. Okay, so my vision. So this is long, I won't read it to you, but I will just kind of synthesize what I really am passionate about. Is I'm extremely passionate about students with disabilities learning alongside their peers in high quality educational settings that's inclusive, diverse, really meets students where they are, celebrates their strengths and their unique abilities, and provides ongoing identification of where the barriers are, to remove those barriers in order for them to be their best selves, in order for them to feel proud of their accomplishments and really help drive where they can go in the future. I think it's really important that we ensure that we're individualizing as we support the students and helping them feel as though they're part of the community, whether educationally, socially, emotionally, academically. Oh, and I forgot my quote, but I'll say it now. It's on the next page too. So really what kind of pulls it all together is that children that learn together learn to live together. And I really see that as being key for our students with disabilities and their peers to have that strong understanding of each other. So embedded in the vision are the following principles. All students are general education students first, and we need to focus on their strengths. General education and special ed must work together. We need to collaborate in order to support our students and use the knowledge of all. Ensure a continuous cycle of improvement and move beyond compliance. Compliance is key, but we want to move beyond compliance. We want to do even more than that. We make our best decisions when using data and classroom experience. And you'll see through my presentation that I love looking at data. And that family engagement matters. So really welcoming family and student partnerships and working with families, helping them to understand what their children's needs are and how to best support them. These are the department priorities that I'll go into a little bit later, the main bullets, but I'm going to talk about some data that led us to these priorities first. So special education strengths. This is something that I was able to recognize as soon as I was done with my first interview. And then it just kept building and getting stronger from there. This community is so collaborative and has such a strong culture of and our staff have that as well. It's so clear to me seeing that our staff really, really care about students, they care about each other, and they want to do what's best for the students in the community. So that is first and foremost and the really most powerful thing that I've noticed in the community. We have a strong collaborative culture. Our teachers, our educators, our professionals, they're dedicated to their work and they really want to learn more in order to support the students. And district-wide programs. So we do have a number of really well-established district-wide programs that helps to support the needs of students and keep them within our community and within our schools. Now our first page of data is another strength that we have. So I think this is pretty powerful data to look at. It is the trend from 2016 to 2022 in really looking at what is the percentage of students in Gloucester that are in full inclusive environments. So full inclusion, meaning that they are in the general education classroom or setting more than 80% of the time. When you look at our data since 2016, we have gradually been increasing with our percentages. So in 2016, we were at 73%. Now in 2022, we're at 76%, which is slightly less than last year. But when you look at it compared to the state average below, which that is the state average of this of 2021, 2022. So that's 66.9%. So we have been above the state average and we continue to be above the state average. So we have strong inclusion population. We have a lot of students that are in our general education classrooms. The other important data to look at on this is the substantially separate programs. And you can see that in 2016, they were higher than they are now. And we've since consistently been going down with having kids and students in substantially separate programs. And also compared to the state, we have been lower than the state. So those are two really good, strong things for foundation, along with the culture that we have. Masks are fun.
Talk about that later.
Okay, so a little more into the data. This is really the percentages of students identified with disabilities. And there's a lot of information on here, but the columns on the left are local area districts. The columns on the right are districts with similar student demographics. So you can see when we compare ourselves to both local and similar demographic districts, we have a very, very high percentage of students that are identified with disabilities. We are at the highest. So part of looking at the data is trying to determine where do we need to go from here? Where are the areas? So looking into what are the areas that we're high in with disability categories. Any questions?
Let me just add one thing. In terms of just kind of like why these districts, so these are districts that we are now regularly using for any comparisons. It used to be in the past, and school districts often sort of pick random districts based on whatever they're trying to show you, whether they can grab. So we have two groups of districts. One is our local area districts. You see on the left, everyone recognizes those. On the right-hand side are what we call DART districts. They're districts that the Department of Education identifies for every district, your most similar or most alike districts. It includes demographic data, ability to pay if you have a student enrollment, different level of disability, sort of thing. So it's the sort of the group of districts that DESE, the Department of Ed, is most like ours in terms of underlying data. And these are the two sets that we'll continue to use, whether we show you financial comparisons or special education comparisons or learning comparisons, that sort of thing. So I want to understand why these two groups.
I have a question. So we're talking right now about how our statistics are a little bit higher. I look at this rate, I haven't been on the committee for a long time. I look at this rate and it's not surprising to me because we've always teetered around 22, 21, 23. So 25 isn't that surprising. But I can't help but wonder, because I know the feedback that I've gotten over the years is that we always had a really good compassionate special ed program here, and that parents are successful getting services without having to hire educational advocates. And I know there are some, but the reputation of this community, from what I hear, has always been very positive when it comes to special ed. And I can't help but wonder, and this is where I want to draw on your experience, do you think our numbers are a little bit higher because we're identifying more students because we're more open to identifying students as opposed to looking at it as a budget impact? Where I know other schools, it's a difficulty to get some services sometimes. So I'm wondering if you have any experience, or if you could answer that, or if you think we're just higher special ed population
So-
here.
I think that's a really good question. And I don't necessarily have all the answers today because I've been learning a lot about the district, and I can see exactly what you're saying. That we have very compassionate teachers, educators that want to support our kids. And by wanting to support our students, if the thought is that special education is going to be able to support and fix things that, or provide supports and help that the students need.
In my experience, I've seen that when RTI is really, or multi-tiered systems of support for social emotional learning, for academics, when those are really strong and in place and consistent across the schools, oftentimes your students with disabilities don't necessarily qualify for special education services because they're making effective progress and they don't need something different in order to make that progress. So that's where I see the percentages are high, and I think we're identifying students with disabilities, but how are we supporting them in order for them not to need
Gain the
something
knowledge
different?
gap last year.
Oops,
Sorry.
thanks. Does that make sense?
does, yeah, it's
And
interesting.
I think you're gonna see when I get through the presentation a little more, when we look at the disability categories, which areas we're high in and what we need to target.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Through the chair.
Go ahead. Mr. Melvin, go ahead.
Thank you. Mine's more of a technical question. When I look at the numbers, at this chart on the enrollment, the chart on the right, I mean, Ben kind of explained, hey, there's a lot of factors that go into this.
Mhm.
But the discrepancy in the number of students in some of those, like I'm looking at Westfield at 4,900 or something. Are we comparing apples to apples? I mean, they have that many students, but they've taken so many of these factors into it that they come out with
Yeah,
that type
in
of.
many ways, it's a better apple to apples comparison than what's on the left, honestly, because they really include ability to, the funding of that district, the demographics and socioeconomic situation of districts. Not to say they're identical in Gloucester, because these are different sized places.
Yeah.
But as you know, as everyone knows, the ones on the left are wildly different in terms of size, town or student makeup, demographics, socioeconomics. So in many ways, that right-hand column, and that's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
Is to give us some really good comparisons beyond just us looking for very close by.
Thank you.
Follow on that. So I know we take great pride having programs within our district instead of having kids go to private placements and other programs. Is there any way to know what our percent, is that later in the presentation?
It's not, but
Okay.
that's another
So-
question
so,
that I
you know,
can,
like,
yep,
You
that's
know,
why I have my.
if we're high because we keep kids here with their families, with their peers, learning
Mhm.
and serving them versus easily, having them go to an outplacement, then this number is good thing, not a bad thing. So it'd be nice to know what.
So I'm able to get into a little bit of that in the presentation. We'll see a little bit of that. But it won't be. Yes. This is just another visual representation in order to look at the data. But it also includes the percentage of students that are placed out of district. So you can see we are on the far left. And you can see that while we're the highest, just like you were just saying, we do have a smaller number of students that we're placing out of district in comparison to the others.
First, the total, the out-of-district placement is included in the 25% number.
Right, okay.
Right.
In addition,
Okay.
but within that 25%, you see, Kate just pointed out that our numbers are actually quite low, percentage is quite low for out-of-district placement. And that, I think, is a real strength.
Right.
Because we do want our folks to be educated, as much as possible, close to home, in the neighborhood schools.
And this data right here that we're looking at is 2021. So it's not this year, it's last year's data. But there is some data from this year a little bit later on. So looking a little further into the percentages of students with disabilities and their placement kind of across the grade levels, you can see in the far left column, I've highlighted the percentages and how they seem to get higher when we get to 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. So those percentages are much higher than what you would want to see. You would want to see that we're able to be providing the supports, closing gaps, and students are coming off of IEPs and meeting the expectation. Question?
Quick question through the chair.
Go ahead.
Katie, it's one of the things that I think is interesting and important is that kids are identified as potential needing extra services at an earlier age. I mean, and do you feel like we do a good job of kind of capturing or identifying those kids in the early age, or the kind of the graph shows, well, yeah, we see an increase when they get up to the higher grades maybe. Is that because we haven't caught them at an earlier age, or is that just because?
So another great question that I don't necessarily have the answer to yet. I think when we look at this and it's highlighted because it really leads us to asking more questions, and often data does that. There could be reason, it could be because of what you're saying, that they're not necessarily getting the services earlier. It could be that we have a number of move-ins at that grade level. So we need to dig deeper and really look at why and help that to guide us going forward. The other,
The crucial piece here is that this is what Katie and her team are uncovering and noticing, and then it's to go to the next steps, which is what you're describing, which is, what's behind this, why is that? And so, that's what Katie says, no, not answers yet, but that's what we're on the path, and some of the work that she'll talk about later is helping us to figure some of these answers out.
And the goal tonight is not for us to give you questions that.
no, it's okay.
No,
It's great. No, it's great. And then you can see similarly, the students that are in substantially separate placements within the district gets higher as they get older. We hit high school, and that's when there is a drastic increase. So we need to dig into that and look at that more in depth too.
Can I just ask a clarification question on that? Would, like the gap be considered substantially separate?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, it would. Good
okay,
question.
so that's maybe
Anchor,
some reflection there.
so the anchor program that we have at the high
Is
school
considered substantial.
is considered substantially separate as well.
Good, that's-
Can you give other examples of say, O'Malley and, and
Yes.
Yeah. Substantially separate, that are in district but substantially separate.
So currently within the district, we have start the younger levels, at West Parish, we have some substantially separate classrooms for students with autism, which we are looking to develop a name for that program, so that we have, with an acronym that really has some meaning behind it. And we have that program that goes through O'Malley as well, and then the high school as well. That's the program that's primarily substantially separate. The student support centers at the elementary school, most of those students, they're all full inclusion. And at O'Malley, it's full inclusion as well. So then when they get to the high school, oftentimes, like you were saying, they go to Anchor, which is a program that has 4 core teachers that follow the students across their 4 years, so that they really get to know those students and support them and build trust with them in order to maximize.
And that's
their
housed
needs.
in the high school.
That's housed in the high school. And then on top of that, we have the GAP, which is the Gloucester Alternative Program for students that need more of a modified day, might be doing some work outside of the school day or within the school day while also getting their schoolwork done. So there's a lot of social emotional programs at the high school level, and that is, I think, why these numbers are higher.
Just a quick one.
Yes.
Those 4 teachers you mentioned, for those 4 teachers for the 4 grades, is there like 1 teacher for each grade, or is it just 4 teachers that work with each student?
Yes, no, I believe it's 4 teachers that are with the students for the 4 years,
Okay.
but I
mean,
don't know how
if
that
the
works
teachers
schedule
change-
wise.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
But they're content teachers, so each of them, one teacher,
Oh, I
so
see.
that's how it
Yeah,
works.
that makes sense.
So one will teach math
Yeah.
to the 4 grades, one will teach science, one will teach.
Sounds great.
So that's how that works. It's really successful. Okay, so then we look a little more into what are the most common disability types. So we have the high percentage that we see, and we look at what are the most common, first most common, second most common, and third most common for disability types, and how do we compare to other districts. So you can see on the data, LD stands for learning disabilities. So those are your students that are diagnosed with dyslexia, dysgraphia, reading, writing, math disabilities. We have, when we look at ours, we have learning disabilities are the highest, but the second highest is health. So when we look at the health category, that is often where students that are diagnosed with ADHD, attention difficulties, will be classified under health. And then emotional impairment, anxiety, depression, behavioral regulation, difficulties with that. But interestingly, when you look at the data is we do have similar trends to Ipswich and Rockport, and those are really the only two districts that have the same top three.
And our dark districts, our dark districts have no emotional.
Not in their top three.
Not in the top three. That's really interesting.
So you said something this morning when we were
I'm trying to
with the
remember.
principals,
Yeah.
just about how then these three are the
Oh,
ones
yes.
that really direct our work.
Thank you. So when this really helps to guide where do we need to go. So if these are our top three disability categories, then this is where we need to do the work. This is where we really need to support students and develop curriculums and methodologies and provide resources to teachers in order to really support with these areas. And you'll see that in the strategic plan, in the planning going forward. All right, so pie graphs. Now, lots of colors on here. This is back in 2015-16. So I wanted to look and see what did our disability categories look like 6 years ago compared to what do they look like now? And how did we compare to the state? So the three on the left, it's Gloucester, and the green and blues on the bottom there, those are our top three: learning disabilities, health, and emotional impairment. And you can see compared to the state, that is a large chunk of the pie for the state as well. But ours is a little bit bigger. So very similar in comparisons when you look at it with this way, but then below you can see the specific percentages where we are higher with the emotional impairment disabilities categories at 15% versus 9%. And then this is today. This is this year, as of October 1st, this is what the data looked like. So again, these three areas, the health and the emotional, are getting bigger. They're growing. So how do we target and support these students? How do we help with the social emotional learning and building the strategies and supports for students that they need in order to be able to attend and be able to, a lot of the health and attention is difficulties with executive functioning and organization. We have a lot of students that struggle with that right now. But you can see on here, it's a similar trend. So there hasn't been any, other than those two pieces of the pie that are getting bigger. Any questions on this? Or go ahead, Laura.
Can you just tell me what the communication one is? Because that's also quite large here.
Yep.
What would that be?
So communication, speech and language, students that have either articulation or expressive and receptive language disabilities. And we see that often in our younger students. It's often a precursor to a learning disability in the area of reading as well.
Because it looks like that's actually higher now than emotional for us. So that would be the in the top three.
Yes, so this is this year's data.
Okay.
Yep. Whereas previously, this is last year's data.
Okay.
Our autism population has grown quite a bit too.
It has.
Is that reflective of, like, at which point did we start our substantially assessment program at West Parish for autism?
I don't know the answer to that.
It was in existence before we built West Parish. For a while. It was in existence
Before
before
the
we
new school.
built West Parish,
Yep.
because we moved them to West Parish.
But was it always only at West Parish, or was
No.
it,
We moved them to West Parish when we built the school.
so was it at a couple different
Yeah.
schools?
Was it at
Fuller.
Vets?
I think it was at Vets or Fuller.
It was definitely at Fuller when I was there, but
Yeah.
This
I guess
year,
I'm sort of wondering.
Vets has the K1. And then Yeah. Second, third, fourth, and fifth is at West Parish, so I believe it might have been at that.
I think when it went to vets is when it went to veterans. I think it was all at Fuller. And then, I don't know, doesn't matter.
I guess I'm just sort of back to your original point, Melissa, about like the reputation, right? Like, as it, when we switched over to the new, to the new building, if we've seen numbers increase just because the reputation has increased. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you should answer that.
I don't know that I know the answer to that, but I know that I don't think that would,
You know, autism numbers are just going up,
yeah.
regardless of the school, wherever it is. And I mean, this year, I mean, you see in the state as well, you know, and it's just, it's actually, it's a phenomenon in the sense that no one's really quite understanding yet why, but it's such a difference than 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
But
with autism.
certainly, some districts, you know, support that population better, and those districts often get a reputation as such. Right?
Yeah, that, it's interesting. There's always in districts, there's that conversation.
Yeah.
Are we or are they getting more, so are people moving there because of their reputation? And that's sort of, you hear that anecdotally.
Yeah.
I think it's been quite hard to actually get defined data to prove that, but people have the sense of that.
Yeah.
In fact, so far, in the districts I've worked in, as in, you know, everyone said that about themselves so far. I'm not saying, not lost, but, you know, so
Yeah.
it just, it always comes up, you know?
Yeah.
But it's hard to really know for sure.
Or if it's just numbers increasing.
Yeah, right, exactly, right.
I think there is, what does come out of that is that there are some families that move to districts where students with autism are more included and not in a substantially separate program.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so I think that is where, and that's where I'd really love to see our students more included in the life of the school, socially, as a community. I think West Parish does a really nice job of it. So just continuing to build. So we looked at the data, and this really helps to guide where do we want to go? What do we need to focus on? So looking at the high percentage of students with disabilities, we really need to take a closer look at our evaluation and eligibility. How are we supporting with identifying students with disabilities? Do we have a high functioning process for evaluating and assessing students? What tools are we using to assess them? We'd really like to move forward and hone really more in on the special education evaluation and referral process. So examine the current model structure that we have and how are we allocating staff resources for evaluations? What training do staff have in understanding and interpreting evaluation results and making decisions? And then when students do qualify and need and are eligible for special education services, how are we writing really targeted, well-developed IEPs in order to really meet them where those weaknesses are and bring them forward and constantly work towards closing those gaps. So that comes with district-wide training for conducting and interpreting evaluations and looking at adequate allocation of staff. So preschool and high school, we have really higher numbers right now for evaluations. And we're needing to look at how can we support those two areas. Also goes along with the professional development and collaboration. It's really working with the administrators, the principals, coordinators, program leaders on special education instruction regulations and disability eligibility.
Do we have a best practice in the district around how soon we get IEPs to teachers before they're in the classroom teaching them? Does that make sense?
Do we have, like, before the school year starts?
Yes, like, at what point does the teachers get the IEP so that they have time to sort of digest it, ask questions, truly, really understand it?
So they should be getting them before they have the students in front of them. And then you have your ongoing consultation with the special education teacher and any related service providers that should be happening, whether it's in the IEP or not in the IEP, really to that collaboration piece is key on them working together and understanding. Specialized curriculum and training. So we really want to look at, our areas that we're having high identifications with specific learning disabilities, social, emotional, and health. So we want to look at what are our needs for ensuring that our students are making effective progress and really closing those opportunities, those the achievement gaps. So identifying district needs for specialized curriculum and training, identifying progress monitoring assessment tools for writing student-centered IEPs, and really aligning our IEPs with the Massachusetts frameworks for students with disabilities. We have a really, at the elementary schools, we have RTI for reading, we have a lot of progress monitoring assessments that we're using. How can we, for our students that need a more clinical and a deeper look at their level of progress, what are we using for those tools? That's really where we're looking ahead. And then if students aren't making progress in RTI for reading and need something specialized, what training do our teachers have in specialized reading instruction? What's their knowledge, and how can they be providing something that's even more explicit and systematic than what the students are getting through RTI? And I have exciting news to share about that, because we were able to offer, so I put it out there to see if anyone was interested in some intro to Orton Gillingham training, the course that's coming up. And I had a phenomenal response to that. So we have 10 of our teachers that are starting an introduction to Orton Gillingham. It's an 8-week course, I believe. It starts tomorrow, and we're fully funding it for them through special education grant. So they got their materials yesterday. They're actually working as a cohort together because there were so many. It's a woman who works in Manchester, Essex, that's running the training. She's certified. And because she had such a large number, she said, I think I'll take your group and we'll just work collaboratively together. So they're going to get a really nice opportunity to work closely together and to learn together, and then be able to bring that back to their schools.
Katie, can you give us a 30-second snapshot of what Orton Gilliam is? Or-
Yes, I can.
That was a
Give you
softball,
a
but I gave you-
30 minutes.
30 seconds. So when we think of specialized reading instruction,
Yep.
it is explicit, systematic, multisensory, frequent repetition. Orton Gillingham is that umbrella term for specialized reading instruction. It's a way to teach reading. So it's not here's your box and your program that you're going to use to teach reading. This is how students with disabilities learn. They learn through multisensory. Here's the tools. Here's where you focus in and teach them through multisensory approach. Here's where you start, and here's where you repeat and repeat. So it really takes reading and it breaks it down. Learning how to read is not a natural process for everybody. So Orton Gillingham is just that overall umbrella. Within Orton Gillingham, we have programs. Wilson is a program that uses Orton Gillingham methodology. Spire is another program that uses the methodology. So there's different programs, but I think it's so important for teachers to understand that whole big picture and then be able to really individualize lessons for students as to where they're at.
And part of that individualization is that you can do certain instruction for kids depending on the disability they have, or depending on the struggle they're having. And being able to identify that and then provide that specific type of instruction can really help them make their effective progress.
And is that just at the elementary level?
So it's at the elementary level, yes, right now.
So it's
We do
really
have
those
at
skills.
O'Malley and at the high school, we have special ed teachers that are reading specialists certified. We don't necessarily have that for our special ed teachers at the elementary level, and they are so eager to learn and utilize new practices. So it's exciting. It's special education teachers, as well as there is a reading interventionist from that who's also doing it. Okay, continuum of services. So when we think about where do we need to build and support, we see the percentages of our students that are in full inclusion placements. It's very high. So full inclusive programming and planning, we need to focus in on that. We need to really look at how are we bringing the services to the students in the room? How are our special education teachers really supporting the teachers and the students within that environment that they're in? So really, I just started at the top, providing a continuum of programs and services that are designed to meet the unique and individual needs of students within their neighborhood schools. So we do have programs within different buildings, but how do we increase the capacity and really support our students in their neighborhood schools, specifically in the area of reading and social emotional learning? And I skipped over the first one, increasing our capacity to provide additional inclusive programming within our integrated preschool program. And you asked a lot of questions about that at the budget meeting. And with our preschool, we really want to look at what are we offering families? How can we offer more options? How can we continue to make sure that our preschool really is integrated and our students are getting that access to peer models right from the time they enter our schools? Streamlining the programs in order to make sure that in regards to instructional content, methodologies, data collection, consultation, and inclusion opportunities. So with our student support centers at the elementary schools, they're all running slightly differently. So we want to really look at, and this is where the social emotional learning, where it's such a large category of need, working with Amy Cam and the BCBAs to really hone in on what are the specific methodologies and strategies? What are we teaching to our students with the social emotional difficulties in the student support centers? How are we consulting the teachers to really help them to make that progress? And then our learning center. So we have a learning center that starts at 3rd grade. It ranges from partial to sub-separate. So we have noticed that we do have a need for students at the K-2 level, really, that aren't necessarily fitting into what's happening at they're not necessarily making the progress they need to make at their neighborhood schools. So we either need to increase the capacity to support them at their schools or look at how can we better support them. And our autism and life skills programs. So this is really where building those inclusion opportunities, having students learn from their peers is so powerful, and having peers be accepting of students with unique abilities is powerful as well. And then continue to strengthen our consultation and collaboration between special education and general education. So that's really how we move everything forward. Okay, and then when I talked about parent and family engagement, we are working on building a CPAC. So what is a CPAC? It's a Special Education Parent Advisory Council. So every district is required to have a PAC or Parent Advisory Council for special education. We did not have one when I started. I believe that, okay. So
dormant for a year or so.
So dormant, and I said we need to, I reached out to the coordinators and teachers and said, who do you have in your buildings that might be interested? Which parents do you have that might be interested? Because we really want to work together with families. We really want to work together with supporting them and helping them to feel like it's a welcoming environment, and that they have resources, and that they have other parents that they can talk to. And it's their voice. We need the parents' voice in helping us to move our special education programs forward. What is it that they see the need for their students? So that is what a CPAC is, and we do have a CPAC president, Ida Shaker. So, and I want to say a great big thank you to Ida if you're watching. We have lots of really good things that we're looking to build this year. And this is kind of what we've mapped out for our plan. So we're really trying to make the PAC visible right now with outreach, working on a brochure, working on getting information on the new website, bringing it up at IEP meetings, letting parents know that there is a resource. And then in developing informal and formal needs assessments. So looking forward at what is the parent's voice? What are they saying that they need for supports? Current data that we looked at with Amy Cam is the social emotional learning and the mental health. So that goes right along with the high population that we're seeing in that area, and that's really what the focus is. So we are having our kickoff. Amy has she has the April 6th community event featuring Kevin Hines. So, and there's going to be different tables and opportunities there. So that's when we're really going to have our meet and greet with brochures, sign up sheets, really trying to build that and get people to join us. And then we're working on planning out the meetings for next year. So this year we will have in the spring, we'll set up our annual required meeting, which is really on regulations, special education law. Hopefully we can be in person and really get a good crowd in for that. So we're hoping to get some interest on April 6th and then build from there.
Is that something that you consistently are involved in? Like, do you go to all the CPAC meetings? or is
I
it-
will, yes. Right now, it's myself, Ida, and Amy Cam,
Yes.
and we've been meeting regularly.
Okay.
But there are some parents that work in the district that are interested in it as well, and they weren't sure if they were able to be part of it, like on the advisory committee. So I've been looking into that too. So we're really looking to, yes, I want to work with parents and really support them and have them feel like we're here together to support their kids.
No, it's great. Sure.
So this is my final slide. And just kind of feeling like some may see the disabilities, but here in Gloucester, I feel like we see the possibilities. And I'm really excited for the work that we're going to do moving forward. I'm excited to be part of a community that already has such a strong foundation. That's all I have today.
Yeah. I have a question about like what was mentioned about the communication uptick taking third place as of this year. I just wanted to maybe to have a special like attention because of the mask mandates that have been in place. My own daughter has that category where she has communication issues.
Yeah.
Seeing a speech therapist, and you know, it's obviously difficult to learn how to speak properly when all your peers have masks on. So that's a worrying trend to me, the uptick in the communication, and maybe the similar thing with the autism as well. So
I met with the preschool team yesterday, and we were just talking about what are we gonna see when we finally have the masks off with
Yeah.
communication and the impact we're going to see for our younger students that aren't able to see how we're forming our sounds. And
Yeah,
it's a worry the preschool
crucial
teachers,
developmental period
Yeah,
for
the
the
preschool
young.
teachers have
I
that worry.
see similar trends in all the data for their surrounding cities and comparable cities here as well.
Yep.
The majority of which have communication issues in that data.
Other questions or anything I can clarify?
That was terrific.
I did come up with more questions of my own in looking at this data, so I already starting to dig deeper.
We also had a great session this morning with all the principals and our leadership team. And, just sharing, Kay sharing some of her reflections and what she's learned so far. And again, the data you saw and others were very rich for them as well in terms of posing questions. Just commend Katie for jumping in. She's been here for a total of 6 months, but learning a lot, working very close with so many people on many levels, and just I think off to a great start in identifying areas for us to continue to make progress on, and really dig deeply into. And again, that combination of general education, special education, working in a way it hasn't it often doesn't in districts, but it is and will get better here as we go forward. So thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
All right, next item is the superintendent's report.
All right, let me just bring this up, and we got a bunch of things to go over tonight. First, I'll start with a COVID update and give you some, like I typically do, give you an update. This is the wastewater testing results. As you can see, this is from last Friday, lower still. You see there's a little bit of gap here between the bottom, not detected line and where we are, but that's a level that we are at sort of in sort of mid-November about. Not quite, it can get a little bit lower, but it's certainly a remarkable trend over the past about maybe 5 weeks. So that's one sign of good news. Another sign of good news, we're down to 14 active cases across all our schools right now. That is a gigantic shift from 2 weeks ago, and then of course a month ago. There are 0 active cases among staff. So it is this virus continues to surprise us in many ways, and this was I think one of the few times it was a good way that this has shifted so quickly, which is a really big deal. You can see just how things have changed. We haven't seen 14 cases since November 10th, since the first week or so, week and a half of November. So it really is sort of retreating pretty rapidly. Here are student vaccination percentages, and you can see still slight upticks. Total across elementary is 49% of folks vaccinated. 2 weeks ago is 48%. O'Malley you see up by 1 percentage point. GHS holding steady, although we have seen an uptick still at 12th graders continuing to support to have the highest. I will say West Parish does not have a 501% vaccination rate. That is nearly 50%. My mistake, sorry about that. I would want to go back to this slide because, safely educating all students in our schools every day to maximize learning, address our students' full needs, and support community and family needs. Considering all that's been going on, we've done a remarkable job this year, and it can't go without saying. That's our staff, our educators, our operations staff, our transportation food service staff, our families, our school leaders, really continuing to help make sure we are in school every single day and doing it safely. A lot of things have helped us with that. Certainly the effort of all our nurses, especially our staff, our principals, as I mentioned, everyone helping out. The vaccine requirement for staff has helped keep us safe and keep our staff safe and healthy. Even when folks do get sick, illness is typically limited. The required masking and the physical distancing has certainly reduced transmission in our schools. And then also as our families and staff do, they stay out of school when they're sick or they have symptoms. All those things reduce transmission, and when we have the results to show that, the transmission within our schools, even though there have been more cases than ever before, the transmission in our schools has been very low. 1% of our pool testing every week has been positive, and less than 2% of our students who are close contacts in school, fewer than 2% have become positive. Okay, that tells us that most of the contacts and transmission is happening outside of school. It's hard to nail down exact percentages, but certainly all the work that folks have been doing in so many different ways and in all these layers has helped us quite a bit. That's just has been great. Going forward, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, vaccinations must remain our highest priority. We will continue to educate our families and make sure they're aware of when vaccinations are happening. In the community, we are working now with Gloucester Department of Health to have in-school vaccination clinics. These will be just like our flu clinics we've always had for a very long time. And those will be able to give first doses, second doses, and then also we're hoping for boosters as well. That'll be coming up in the next month or so. Nurse Leader Jeff Parko is working with the Department of Health to get those organized and do those in the schools, and that's across all schools K through 12. Want to give you an update on our COVID, our at-home test, rapid test program, which launched last week with our staff. And just to remind everyone, all families, all staff can get a free rapid test to take home themselves every week. We are distributing the tests tomorrow for all our students, not for all our students who've signed up. And those tests are done at home on Fridays. We do the weekly testing, the in-school testing on Mondays and Tuesdays. And then so wait some days, and then folks test on Fridays as well. So literally all of our staff, all of our families, all of our students, I should say, can get free tests twice a week, which is something that's never been available. So we have our in-school testing, our at-home testing, and also symptomatic testing. So that is one of the layers that is not only staying, it's remaining, it's getting stronger actually, the possibility of that. And that will help families and staff know if you ever have any doubt, to be sure that you are of the status of your the students and staff in our schools. So in terms of registration is very good. More than half of our staff have signed up to participate in the at-home testing. 409 folks have registered. Last week, we gave out 383 test kits to our staff. Since then, more people have registered. And the full 409 will get, or more, will get their second group of tests next week. We give out a box every other week. The box has 2 tests in it. And that's why, that's how we do it for students and staff. As I mentioned, tomorrow, more than 1,000 students will receive their free test to take home and do on Friday morning. And then since then we've got just over total 1,040 students that are registered. Tomorrow also paper forms are going home as well for folks to sign up. These have all been online registrations, and tomorrow the paper they'll be translated into 3 languages. So, next steps on this is just what I showed you last week, but just to follow up, and I've really said it already. Student test, they get them distributed tomorrow. They take them home. Those will be distributed in homeroom or here at the high school in A block. If students or staff have positive result, then they contact their school in terms of the absence, but then also fill an online form out so we can track them. And then we now have our contact tracers are now the COVID case management team. Instead of nurses, secretaries, and principals calling families, that case management team, it's 1.5 people, will work with all families to make sure, or staff, make sure they know when it's safe to return to school. So we're taking a whole lot of work off of our nurses, principals, and school secretaries, and making sure that they can do more of their non-COVID duties, which is really why they got into this work. Any questions about the rapid testing before we get into mask update? So this presentation is going to look much different until this morning at our 10 a.m. There's some scrambling.
Nothing.
That's just the title slide. There's a lot of news. I just want to remind folks where we've been, because there's actually quite a bit of confusion about the statewide mask mandate, okay? Just want to pause here and remind everybody who's listening, and of course all of you, that we've been doing masking. It's in a statewide mandate, okay? Even if the school committee, except for in a specific case, the school committee could not have retracted that, okay? And then we're getting a lot of phone calls and emails over the last couple of weeks asking us to do that. You couldn't have, except for one narrow area. But just want folks to understand that was not your local decision, it was a statewide decision, statewide requirement for all students and staff to be masked. The commissioner, as recently as January 10th, extended that until February 28th. Okay, that's how we've been living until this morning, 10 o'clock. I do want to say one question people had, just so you know, and I'll move on this, is we had the opportunity to move away from the mask mandate that the state had set if the combined staff and student percentage of vaccinations in our schools was over 80%. Okay, we have never reached that. We've been reporting student vaccinations when we feel asked for, we've been sharing that, but the combined percentage, even at Gloucester High, which is the highest, still has not reached the 80% threshold. So we've never been in the area, or never had the possibility to go down the route, which the state allowed us to do, to repeal the mask mandate because we're at that threshold. It just hasn't been open to you. But as of today, very importantly, Commissioner Riley announced that the statewide mask requirement for all public schools will be lifted on February 28th. Okay, there are a few pieces here for the committee to consider and also be aware of. First off, masks must continue to be worn on school buses and all transportation. That is a federal order. Okay, not something we can change, that you can change, or the state can change at this point. We have no understanding or no knowledge of whether that's going to be changed. I'm just not aware of it, so I can't comment on that. The commissioner continues to support a layered approach. This is his communication, and that's the things I talked about. Prioritizing testing, which we're certainly doing, prioritizing vaccinations, supporting those. At this point, there are no changes in recommendations for distancing or for lunch. Okay, as you just see, was silent on that today. Okay, so the DESE does strongly recommend, okay, and that's the language they're using, strongly recommend that mask wearing continues in the following two situations. One, positive individuals who return after a 5-day isolation. So, for example, I test on Friday morning, I'm negative, I'm out for 5 days, my symptoms are better, I can come back into school on the 6th day, okay? But at that point, it would be strongly recommended that I continue the mask. Okay, that's the state is saying, all right, for another 5 days. Okay, then also the DESE is strongly recommending that unvaccinated individuals continue the mask. Okay, the important piece here, and DESE said this, but I would reiterate this, is whatever committee decides, okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. There are going to be folks who want to continue the mask. That's okay, and it needs to be okay. All right, we need to have a culture in Gloucester because in other countries, in other places, folks, when they have they're sick or recovering from flu, a common cold, in this case COVID, they actually have a norm of to wear a mask because they know it helps others keep safe, and they know also that they want to keep safe as well. So that will likely happen no matter what you decide. Okay, and it's very important. We always want to accept and honor and recognize differences. Okay, and this may be one going forward that exists in our schools and it needs to be okay. Having said that, Gloucester School Committee, all of you, this city still has, the school committee still has a mask policy in effect. Okay, as you know, for all your policies and to educate the public, your policy remain in effect until you take a vote to rescind them. Okay. At this point, no school committee meeting, you don't have a school committee meeting scheduled for now on February 28th. If you want to do that, as you know, as the public knows, you can set a meeting to do so. So that's the update on the mask as of today. I was hoping there'd be no major changes from DESE for a few weeks, but I think a couple weeks went by. And so so I think this is a positive development. As I said last time, we want to keep working towards normalcy and normalization. We're entering a new sort of an era, a new time in terms of instead of like living with COVID, life without COVID, and not without COVID, but sort of moving from like COVID running our lives, okay, which it has for 2 years, to living with COVID, and those are going to be different things. And so this is potentially another step. Happy to answer questions and then.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Verga.
Yeah, not a question, but more of a comment than kick off the discussion. I think it's welcome news, but keep in mind that this Board of Health met Thursday, and they decided to hold a special meeting this coming Friday, after tomorrow, because the next sewer bot, whatever they call it, is.
Biobot.
Thank you. The BioBot's supposed to have another round of testing on Friday, so they were originally, Friday was planned to take a vote to decide whether or not to rescind the previous order, which added a mask mandate in publicly accessible spaces. I called Joe Rosa and Max Schenk today to talk about, to find out what the deal was with the mask mandate in public buildings, City Hall, other places like that. And at first it was the mayor that you could do that. But after some research, it's like, no, actually the Board of Health made that decision. So I asked them to revise their agenda to include that as a discussion item. So my suggestion in a chat with the chair today is we take no action until Friday, till after the vote is taken at the board Friday, and schedule something definitely before March 2nd, which is our next schedule, first or second, right?
First, second.
We don't want to come to the 28th without action. So I think my suggestion is sometime next week, schedule a meeting and take a vote. And it could be a completely Zoom meeting for this purpose. One item on the agenda to talk about this.
That's, it's not on our agenda tonight for action, so we
Right.
will have to schedule another meeting. I think the thought is we would definitely want to digest the information. It's not on our agenda, so we can certainly ask questions tonight. And then we would take it up. And a date next week that we can agree on, that everybody's available. Laura?
So this is more a comment as well, given this discussion is,
Or you might want to speak up just because the microphone,
oh,
which is in the middle.
I see. So just another question or comment is that if we are going to discuss this again, I would want Max Shank or someone from the Board of Health to be, we are not public health professionals. So I would want to hear directly from a public health professional as we discuss this, because of course that's not what we were elected to do.
Melissa, you said you
I have a question to Greg, so the chair to Greg. So knowing that the Board of Health does not have any jurisdiction over what's going on in the schools as far as the decisions for masks, I'm just respectfully asking why would we wait for the Board of Health to make a determination before we discuss it? I'm just trying to
I didn't say-
understand, that's all, not, I'm
Yeah,
just
I
trying to
didn't-
understand.
As far as discussing it, it's, we can't vote based on.
Well, we can't vote tonight, no, I
So,
understand
but my
that.
suggestion is if they're meeting tomorrow, let's say
Friday.
Friday. anyway.
Right, yeah,
So no sense in scheduling something tomorrow or Friday. We need 48 hours anyway.
exactly.
So we might as well do something next week, half hour, 10 hours. But at least we'll have in hand
Yeah.
what they discussed, their actual votes. And we
Okay.
can, I have no problem asking, I'm blocking my camera, sorry, having Max appear on Zoom and or Joe Rosa or somebody else from the board.
I was just trying to determine if you saw some sort of link other than just the timeline, that's all.
No, and the reason I for obvious reasons, because having a special meeting, can't vote tonight, we
Yeah,
don't want to
no.
wait till after the 28th. People are chomping at the bit for a decision.
Yeah.
And we don't want to come in with the March, after it's the ending, without a real, an answer for people.
I get it. Thank you.
Through the chair, and we're not asking the Board of Health for anything. All we want is just feedback.
Some thoughts, yeah, I think Q&A is a valid thing to do. As Lauren said, we're not experts in the field of health.
Can I just want to respond to that, just, the previous committee, we never made any decisions in relation to COVID without feedback from our public health department. None of us have that background, and so it's, I think, a strength that we've continued to bring to the table to receive feedback from public health officials.
Right, and should they vote Friday to not rescind it, that says a lot. But like I said, regardless of how they vote, it makes sense to have them here for the special meeting whenever it happens. Tell them to set aside 5 or 10 hours to be available.
And who would be the representative?
Sorry?
Who would be the representative from the Board of Health?
Well, it would be up to them. I would start, well, obviously Max is the health department, and then someone from the board, Joe's the chair, it's up to him if he would like to.
A
go.
Dr. Beerman?
Well, it's up to Joe, he's the chair,
Okay.
he's the one that knows the science. So anyway, I don't have control over the board.
Yeah, I understand. I just want to hear from a medical professional. That's all.
Any more questions for our superintendent? Because there are probably people that want to make comments.
I just-
We want to get through our questions first.
So I would also, as part of this discussion, want to hear from teachers and other staff in the buildings. So I don't know how we can get, I mean, we can get that feedback certainly in oral communications. But it would be a big change for them. And I certainly would want to hear from them.
can I just add to that one of the key things that was in the last slide from the state today, the culture of acceptance.
Yeah.
That's the biggie. You know, we can't have the bully and whitey and the mascot. That's not really effective. So we're gonna do our part to make sure it's acceptable to protect yourself. If you
Yeah, I
stick
think the
around.
consistent message has to always be, we accept differences and we certainly
Yeah.
probably encourage safe behaviors, whatever, we possibly do. So we have to, there's messaging, I think, I mean, there's a lot to discuss next week, but there's a lot of pieces to it to make sure we're successful with whatever we do.
I do want to be clear on a couple things. You know, this is still in place. It's still in place in our schools. I understand that many folks, and that's, staff, families, students, want it to end. It will at some point. But for now, it remains in effect. And we need everyone's support in keeping it in effect. People can certainly should make sure the committee and myself know where you stand, that's A-okay. But we really need family support as we ask them to support all of our school rules and school procedures and school processes to keep this one, support this one as well. Understanding that, the committee's got to make a decision and will, in a timely and deliberative manner. It's challenging our schools for many reasons because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And to make it more challenging by pushing hard against this within the schools does not help us at this point. Doesn't help the health or safety, culture or dynamics of our schools. So it's really important, I think, for the public to hear and to hear from me that we need your continued support on following all school rules and school policies, including this one, until there's action taken on it.
So today we heard from the governor, and I didn't get to actually see the announcement. I only saw bits and pieces of it when I Googled it after work. That he and Commissioner Riley made their decision based on health data, speaking to the Department of Health in Boston and to health experts. So that's how that decision came out today, because he did the work that we want to do here. My concern is hearing this conversation, I would just ask the committee to consider that any decision we make regarding our mask policy, which obviously we would have to amend or revoke or withdraw, whatever the word we want to use, I would ask that we put this on a timeline so that by February 28th, when this date goes into effect, that we have had a response and give an answer to our families, because I think there will be absolute chaos afterwards, trying to manage that status if we don't make our decision by February 28th. I know with April, February vacation coming up, that puts a little wrench into time. So I'm gonna ask that we act quickly on this so that by February 28th, we know what modifications or changes that are coming to the school district and everyone's prepared for it.
Can I add to that? I think just as importantly, I think families and teachers need time to sort of talk about, like, if we were to make any changes to our mask mandate, to talk about the norms being different, right? Kids are gonna need some time to sort of digest that and sort of think through that, oh, this might look different. And so I think to that point, it's important to think about that timeline to respect families' ability to communicate this with their families and get their kids ready for any possible changes, if we so choose.
So I was going to suggest we meet next Wednesday. I know we have building, we get to be in budget finance next Wednesday at 5. So I was going to suggest maybe we meet after that. If everybody is amenable to that date.
What time did you say?
That's the 16th,
Yes.
so 7.
Yeah.
Is that work for you guys?
Oh, yeah, I'm at the full committee.
Being up going to take the 2 hours.
We looked at the agenda yesterday,
Hour and a half.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
quite hour and a half. Always give you guys a little buffer, but if you want to try for 6:30.
Pizza?
So what is my,
Do you guys maybe
support
want
that?
like a little break in between?
I want to make this decision, so if Wednesday works, Wednesday.
No, I just
We're
mean
talking about
like,
Yeah,
6:30
instead of
versus 7.
starting.
Yeah, I just,
Sure.
I think this, our discussion is probably gonna be lengthy.
Yeah.
So I don't, I mean, I don't know that we need much time in between. I agree with Gary. I think it's probably gonna be about an hour and a half, and we can make that happen. So that gives us a half hour to digest the things.
Listen,
Yeah.
get up, stretch your legs.
Yeah.
So is there any other questions before? Okay.
So, well, I just want to make sure so that we know when this is posted, because Laura said she wanted to hear from teachers and staff. We got over 50 to 60 emails today from parents
And some teachers.
and some teachers and some nurses, and they were all pretty much in line with the same request. So are we
No.
having,
There are a couple.
Not all.
out of 60, pretty much
I
they
saw a
were.
pair that were.
Yeah, there's a couple, but I didn't say all of them. Don't get upset here. But are we having a public hearing on that day? And if we are these letters considered part of the public hearing? In other words, if we want to hear from teachers, and I understand, how are we hearing from everyone instead of just having a night of just hearing from teachers? Like, will parents be able to speak as well? Are we advertising this as a public hearing as part of our meeting? I guess is my question. So it's a process question.
What is the will of the committee on that?
My opinion, I don't know if there's a need for public hearing, that people are feeding us their opinions already, they have been, and in light of it, yeah, after the announcement, they came fast and furious. So I don't think there's gonna be a shortage, even if we didn't ask for one. But if we make it clear, we're meeting next Wednesday at 6:30, whatever time we said, please, staff, students, parents, interested in bystanders, send your information to the school committee email address,
That's what I was gonna say. I want to encourage anyone watching, or I just want to encourage anyone who wants to have their voice heard, who is a Gloucester resident,
yes.
who lives and moves in this city.
Or employee.
Or
Or
employee,
employee.
yes, or an employee, but people who are related to Gloucester, specifically, to really send your feedback to us, send your comments to us. It's schoolcommittee@gloucesterschools.com. And I think that it's important to hear from as many members of the community as possible.
And so just to confirm, I didn't mean to cut anybody off, but
So I did say we were gonna, oh, go ahead.
just to confirm, so you want Max here and somebody from the Board of Health
I'm not sure.
and or,
Max Thornford is the director,
Yeah.
is our director. In the past committee, we had Karen Carroll here.
okay. So Max, and then obviously we'll know what happened at the meeting anyway, for the board. So Max, okay, we'll do that.
Kathy, did you say 6:30 or 7? 7?
Yeah, because we're doing B&F first. That gives us a little leeway for time.
Okay, so I did say we will accept comment tonight on this topic. Hopefully people have learned from the presentation kind of where we're at. I guess we'll open it up for people who want to raise their hand and speak. And Graziella Peony, I've seen your hand for a while, so you are up first.
Hi, I just want to say thank you to you all for your efforts and hard work.
Graziella,
wanna-
can you give us your name and address, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Graziella Peony, 4 Cedarwood Road. And I'll start over. I just want to say thank you for all your tireless work. It must be exhausting, but I want to say especially thank you to Kathy and to Melissa for responding to every single one of my family members who emailed. Instead of taking to social media and generalizing, I felt a sense of appreciation, regardless what we stand for. I think it's huge to be recognized when you take the time and, put the kids first. And I look forward to you guys using your leadership and your voices to make the right decision for our kids. It's time that we move forward. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, for everybody for being here. Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening? I do not see anybody. I wonder if we had public comment first. Oh, somebody else? Okay. We have
Lacey Allen.
Lacey Alves. Lacey Alves.
Hi, I'm Lacey Alves. I'm a fifth grade teacher at West Parish. And I want to just thank you guys for everything that you've done throughout this pandemic. And I just want to tell you, I'm just excited that we have some news to move forward. It's just been a long time. And I almost get teary-eyed thinking about what instruction will be like in my classroom with faces, to see the kids get excited, to see them collaborate with each other and share information with each other. So when it happens, I'm just thrilled that we're kind of seeing the light at the end of this tunnel. And that's all I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much. Next person is Carolyn Ferrano.
Make sure you unmute.
Carolyn?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. And then, address, please.
Hi, this is Carolyn Perino, 364 Essex Ave in Gloucester. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. I also want to say thank you for all your support and work. I would really like to see this happen. These kids deserve to move on after 2 years. I guess I did have a big question though. I heard there was maybe 800 folks who had COVID in our city. Are you considering the natural immunity also to vaccination statuses? Because I think that's pretty important with the facts from the CDC.
I would say we don't. Are we considering natural immunity as part of being considered vaccine is what I think the
No,
question is.
no, the question that the school committee is asking me to, the data that the school committee is asking me to give you is the number of folks who are fully vaccinated, not immunized. If you want to ask the health director or anyone from the Board of Health about this question, I think it's up to you, obviously. So in case you can hear me, the data that we report and I report is based on those students and faculty who've been vaccinated. So it's not, you asked about a question of immunized, it's about vaccinated, so strictly vaccinations.
That answer, are you okay with that answer?
Not really, but I guess if that's how you're doing it, I just think that natural immunity should come into play, and I think it is important. I just want to see these kids without masks. It's been a long 2 years. My two kids have suffered a lot mentally with this, and it's time to move on from this. We need kids to, move on and have a sense of normalcy in their lives now. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Deanna Benjamin.
Hi, my name's Deanna Benjamin. I live at 14 Briarwood Court. I just wanted to touch base on something Sam said real quick. She had mentioned that she kind of wanted to give the children some time to adjust. And we have to remember that our children 2 years ago got thrown into this and had no choice but to adjust to no school, adjust to masks. So I do think that they are resilient and that the children at this point in time understand everything to do with COVID. I think we're all pretty open with our children, and they've seen everything. So I think that you guys should give the children an opportunity to speak, at every age level, elementary, middle, and high school. But I think it's time, and I think it should be the choice of the parents and the students. Thank you.
Can I clarify something?
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify my comment is in relation to getting to a decision sooner rather than later so that parents and children have time to adjust before the mask mandate is lifted on the 28th. Just to clarify.
Okay. Anybody else? once. Going twice. Okay, thank you, everybody, for your patience through, and waiting for us to have comment at this, point in the meeting, because I thought the presentation was important to, hear from the superintendent first before we actually, started taking comments, because there's a lot of good useful information. I do think as a school district and as a committee and as a community, we need to continue to stress vaccinations, because had we reached 80% prior now, we might have been having some interesting discussions prior now as well. So let's keep working on those numbers, because those will always help us keep us all safe. That's right. So, okay. Is that the end of your?
No,
Okay.
well, we also have the budget
All right.
presentation. Yeah.
No, is that the end of your superintendent's?
Oh, yes, that is, yes.
Okay, so do we have? a
Well,
motion?
sorry, go one more piece.
Okay.
Which is sharing with everybody. And it's good to see that everyone's still on the line and no one's hung up yet, because we're going to show you the new Gloucester website. Which is a very big deal and is simple, straightforward. We have a great slideshow here, which shows kids, but also shows important announcements. There's the testing at Sage Ford Park. We also have links to the, oh, there's some kids. That's nice to have kids on the website. We haven't had that before. And so just a few things. So welcome here. Obviously, quick, there is our rapid testing at home. Click on that to get there and sign up. Click an easy link to our Everyday Matters website. Some really key, just obvious icons here for parents to get to the most sort of used and most clicked areas of the website, easy to get to. A link to the East Gloucester Veterans Building Project. And that's it on the homepage, that's all, okay? Whereas before it was a mishmash of everything under the sun. And the good news is all the navigation's up here and very clear our district, and it has these different departments, our schools. We will be working over the next few months on revamping the school websites. Quick links, those are sort of the most common, those are like those icons below, the most commonly used areas. Families, community, a whole bunch of things, everything from registration and calendars and meals and payments and bus routes and school brains portal, health services, all sorts of things here. A page for students, which is all the sort of many of the tools they use in school. So if they want to get on, Clever login or Alexia, that's all there. And our staff intranet. The nice thing about there's a great school committee page, which we're opening in a picture of all of you up on. And it has very easy access to the agendas, the packets, the minutes, and archives, as well as the policy manual. So just show that to you. This is where your picture goes here, because that is not anywhere in the Gloucester Public Schools. But it's still a work in progress. I did surprise our staff with this change today. It wasn't a great move on my part, but I was so excited to get it out there. We did move some links around. We are, Grant Harris has been gigantic in helping with this. It's been, just did yeoman's work. On the homepage there, it was he figured out how to have the moving water. We're hoping at some point to have a picture from the boulevard on that page instead, because that just looks like it's the great blue yonder. But it is still a work in progress. There's some sections that aren't built yet. If folks, especially our staff, if they have links they can't find or things they need, just make sure they reach out to Grant or submit a work ticket. And the most important piece is that the different sections are controlled by, can be edited by different staff members. So whereas before the previous site, very few people actually had the access or even knowledge how to update it. Now we have the folks in different departments who can update it. So it will be more updated, more updatable, and a little more dynamic, and also just easier to find resources. So that's one quick thing on a significant change. This is maybe a 1 or 2 year site, and then we'll look into something that's even more professional too. That's it.
Is there a way, and I haven't used it to know, so when you get to the school committee page, right, and you click on an agenda, say for tonight's meeting, is there a live link to go live on Zoom? In other words, go to school committee, click, you're in our meeting.
On those PDF, I don't know yet. I mean, we're still, it's still the same document posted before. It's not a different document. Okay. What we do have is here, the remote public meetings right on the, right, if you're looking here, right on the same page, with all the upcoming meeting schedule and our remote public meetings.
I'm just thinking of a quick join here.
That's great.
It's different every single meeting. We'll
Right.
look into see if we can figure it out.
But I noticed like on the city website, when you go to Zoom meetings, when you click on the agenda, there's a live link there to join.
Yeah,
So I wonder if we can,
yeah,
Copy that.
let's look into,
so it's not a link that's right there. You go into the agenda for that day
yeah.
and then click on it.
That's a trade secret.
Yeah, you can give it up. You're a school committee member
We might be even- I think we may even be able to one up.
Okay.
City.
I think so.
So,
Challenge.
by having a live link right here. Okay.
Yeah, that would be
Yep,
better,
Great.
because I was looking for where school committee is, so you do have to do some searching. We should have a big button.
That's what I'm thinking.
And on that, I mean, could we have any ability to have access to changing it or?
No.
We're the one.
There you go.
All right then.
Yeah, so,
No, maybe we can talk about that. The school committee website would make sense that the school committee secretary perhaps has some access. Yes, we can talk about
just
that.
keep adding on to the secretary's job description.
Okay.
Can I just say something? real
Oh,
quick?
yeah, of course.
I just want to thank you for prioritizing this. Like, this is a big deal, and I want to thank Grant for, spending a lot of time doing this. It's helpful on so many levels. I see parents on Facebook consistently asking, like, where can I find this? Where can I find this? And I really hope that this helps to streamline the process and simplify it.
It should, and ultimately the test is, can people find a logical thing? Oh, I'm looking for this. Can I find it? And also, the search will be much better as well. Okay, but that'll be the test, and then we'll learn about that as we go along, and keep on giving us feedback.
Yeah.
It's easy to change, and we want to make sure it's user friendly and people can find things logically in a way with a few clicks. Great, thank you very much, Sam. Really appreciate that. Okay, the next. Oh yeah, sorry.
Do we have a motion to approve to accept the superintendent's report?
So second.
Say the website.
All right. Maria, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Mayor Verda,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy.
Yes.
And Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
All right, we will move on to the fiscal year 2023 budget presentation.
Okay. So I'll go through tonight, introductory on this, so the sort of process, calendar, that sort of thing. So the overarching priorities and intentions. Don't get into the financial section, which is about the different parts that make up the budget. We'll conclude that with a budget summary of the increase we're expecting, or no, not increase I'm recommending in this draft. We will talk a little about a few things that are still need to be worked out. And then I won't go through it, but you have an additional information section in the report here. Let me just jump in here. Guiding principles for FY23 budget development. So first and foremost, it's got to be connected to our priorities. You know that through the B&F subcommittee, all our schools and our major departments came forward and talked about their strengths and their priorities and how the work they're already doing and will be doing to continue on with those priorities. That is the sort of basis of our budget decisions. Linked to that is a plan for ongoing improvement, which we're developing now. Those are part and parcel. They're built together. Another piece is moderation and financial prudence. They're always a must in municipal budgeting. They need to be a must, especially as with unanticipated expenditures from COVID that may or may not continue to be present. And so we have to be prudent. We have to look for moderate increases because we still don't know what the future will bring. And we do expect that there'll continue to be additional expenditures based on COVID. Don't know what those are because they always change. Another area that we see reflected in our budget for FY23 is the great progress we made in terms of salary adjustments. that will help us with improving recruitment and retention of staff. And then the last piece is building a budget eye towards FY '25. That's when all our major federal relief funds go away. And if we don't think about that now, work on that now, we will create a cliff that will be very hard to recover from. And we don't want to do that. And that we'll talk more about that, but that includes what we're spending that money on, how we're spending it, and then how we're incorporating any of those expenditures into the operating budget over the next couple of years. I'll talk about that at length in a moment. One thing that we had last year in my first year here and continues a collaborative budget process, that's with the directors of our departments, that's with our school principals, that's also with the city. So meeting with the city, understanding what the city's finances are, understanding what we can expect as an increase, and making sure we live within that. We asked all of our department and school principals, what are the strengths and priorities for your school department? What are you already doing to execute on those? What are you willing to, what do you need in order to execute on those? And what are some things you're willing to let go? That last question is really based in the principle that we don't just keep doing things because we've been doing them. We have to always assess them. Are they still the right thing to be doing? And if not, can we let go of them? And that means changing practices. That might be changes in professional development, changes in support we're providing, and sort of thing, changes in the curriculum, things like that. Here's the budget planning calendar. Excuse me, as you can see, a bunch of steps. We're in the third step right here. And really month by month, we get more and more detailed. The budget book is presented to all of you next month, sorry. Then we move to the more public process of it, which is the public hearing in April. That moves then towards the school committee approving the budget that we submitted to the mayor and city council. And then the city council has its own process in terms of approving, as it approves every department budget, also approves the school committee budget. And that returns to you for your final vote in June, towards the end of June. This is a different look at that, just to point out that we're at the green stripe here, which is my presentation to all of you about the budget. So intended outcomes, a couple things here. I already mentioned closely align the budget with our strategic priorities. Allocating dollars for the good work that's already happening, continue the good work, and then allow for sustainable growth. Building a budget that allows for sustainable growth is first building it based on our ongoing improvement in student learning, engagement, instruction. It's also about shifting ESSER funds to either one-time expenses or off the grant funded on the operating budget, and then also anticipating increases that we always can sort of rely on in a sense, which are our health insurance costs. They continue to go up. Our salary adjustments, we have to always plan for those and know what those are, and then build a budget based on what we know is coming in terms of those structural increases. Let me jump into some of the dollars here. Really, pretty much year to year, we expect big changes in certain categories. So health insurance increases, salary increases and adjustments, those are ups and downs, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Retirements, typically we find some retirement savings. If someone retires at a higher salary, we typically can replace them at a lower salary. On occasion, positions of program expenses. Interesting enough, this year, most of our new program expenses we're really looking towards grant funding to fund those. So we'll talk about that more. But so for curriculum expenses, for example, for our English language arts pilot at the elementary schools and our new math program at the elementary schools, we're actually funding the materials and resources for those through grant funding, as opposed to adding it onto the operating budget, which is a really good way of doing and a really good use of those grant funds, which are limited time only. And of course, that investment is sort of 1 or 2 year investment. And then also special education costs, including out-of-district tuition, transportation, and placement of students. Those always fluctuate pretty significantly, typically go up, but also depend on enrollment, we talked about earlier in terms of special education enrollment. So in terms of, so I'll go through some of these one by one. So we'll start with employee health and dental insurance. Typically goes up. It's a typically a pretty significant portion of our annual increase from the city. This year, you see a $344,000 increase. These are just for employees. And you see that the cost of our budget for this expense, so out of $44 million and change, $6 million of that is health and dental insurance. Okay. That's not the whole story, because we also have an employee and retired employees insurance costs. So the total projected cost for health insurance for all employees and retired is $6.8 million next year. That's a total increase of $395,000, almost $400,000 over this current year. That's a 5.8% increase that we project at this point. This may change as we get further on and they set the GIC number, but this is a number that we've also checked with the city, and that's a number they said is a good estimate at this point. You can see historically, this is kind of on the low end. Okay, we see sort of these higher ones of 7-8%, and then a number of years at the sort of high, 5%, almost 6% is where we are. So that seems like a good projection, but it's a significant part of our budget, and it is every year. The
Can I
increase,
make a comment to the health insurance before you go on?
sure.
So yesterday we learned that Fallon is no longer going to be part of the GIC as of July 1st.
Okay.
And that's one of the lowest cost health insurance. So just keep in mind, I'm curious how the shift from that is going to be, because they're not replacing it with another lower cost one. So the plans available are the ones that are available now minus Fallon. So we just have to keep that in mind too, because that might have been a pretty popular selection.
Yep. So we'll look into that. I just said,
So that could increase it a little bit more based on wherever the rates go.
brand new news, as you said.
Yeah.
Pardon at this point, no impact. But just as that's another example of why this likely is to change.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes up from our earlier projections here, sometimes it goes down, but it will change. We should expect it to. And Gary likes to say, this is part of this. This is a budget process. This is not, set in stone at this point, and our budget is not set in stone at this point in terms of the recommendation, and this is one of the reasons it's not. Thanks. So we've also made, as we know, have reached agreement on almost all of our labor unions. In terms of professional staff, that's really our educators, so our principal, our paraprofessionals and our teachers have really gone toward eliminating some bottom steps. So that's increasing our starting wages, helping to attract more folks to the island, increasing our education course reimbursements as well. We've shortened the number of years needed to reach the top salary, and also significantly increased athletic coaching pay. That increase in athletic coaching pay is really sort of making it our coaches pay much more comparable to our surrounding districts. It was quite a bit lower and had not had an increase in quite some time, and so we bumped it up significantly to get it there. All of these things, and then here on our operations support staff, a similar approach. Again, wanted to increase our starting salaries. As folks know, it's never been more difficult to attract staff across many sectors, including education. So try to increase wages at starting salaries, and a similar approach here in terms of allowing folks to get to the top salary quicker. That does have an impact, as it always does, in terms of our, the vast majority of our annual budget is our cost for salaries, as it is in most organizations. The total cost for increases in teacher compensation was just under $1 million from last year to FY23. That's I guess what might be helpful, Gary, to show how that increase compares to previous years. You'll see that's in line. So that's sort of about the salaries there. But I will say this, the committee, you've been doing this work, so you know it well, has done a really great job of especially supporting our non-resident salaries, our support staff, our operations staff, in terms of making their salaries much more competitive. Doing it within the budget, doing it reasonably, doing it fairly, but also making some significant adjustments to help our staff. It's not a small thing, and it's a really great thing to be able to do within our budget, which we can't. Any questions? As you folks know, ESSER funding, so that's the federal relief funding. ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, two different grants, two different amounts of money, significant dollars here. We have been last year shared with you and got approved by you, different positions that we've added. These are all the positions we've added through ESSER. Of course, we've added also cleaning and filters and nursing costs, COVID costs, instructional supplies and materials, curriculum materials. So, but these are just positions, okay, that we're funding through these federal grants. As I said before, any positions of these that we want to have long-term, we need to get them onto the operating budget. So here is a 3-year plan to get these on the operating budget. We're starting with the top 4. I'll talk about those in a moment. But you can see at this point, take on more in FY24, and then the last remaining one in FY25. It's not necessary that we'll keep all of these. We want to make sure that we continue to have the need, and then we keep them in case that's the situation. We can talk about these 4, which are the first 4. These 4 are doing one of 2 things, really. At least 1 or 2 things, of 2 things. First of all, they're getting us quite a bit more capacity, leadership capacity, and support capacity to coordinate really important services across the district. Okay, that mental health coordinator is Amy Tam. She presented to you last week. That is as I think was pretty obvious, an essential position to have at this point for all the support that she's providing across our schools to our staff, so they can better support other staff and support students. So that was the number 1 priority, to get that off of grant funding and on the operating budget. Okay. Similarly, GHS Special Education Administrator, that's Lisa Williams. We elevated her last year from a special education program leader to the coordinator position, so she can oversee all the special education work. Work very, very closely with Katie and provide additional support and supervision for special education teachers and staff, but also really oversee the out-of-district placements as well, and substantially separate programs. And that coordination is already reaping benefits in terms of support, supervision, and helping our staff to do their work. Transportation manager also, again, improving coordination for operations staff, adding redundancy so we are running a safer operation, an operation that can look into things like the 70 transportation to reduce costs. So again, a key position, which is really making that operation stronger, safer, and more sustainable. And then the last one, adjustment counselor, this and in many ways, the district mental health coordinator supporting our social emotional support, particularly at the middle school where we have significant needs and have been sort of understaffed to some degree. Those are the things we're taking on the operating. Those are really the primary new, I'd say, new positions on the operating budget. They aren't new positions, we've been grant funding them, but those are the ones we're adding to the operating budget. But limited to those. Additional tuition costs, so often a driver of increases in district budgets. We anticipate next year we'll have 53 students in out-of-district placements for a cost of just over $4 million. These placements are made on an individual basis with a team approach, a team process approach that is determined by state and federal law that we need to follow. It is typically a process done with families, an extensive sort of evaluation of our students to make sure that when we aren't able to educate them in a way that will help them make effective progress for a limited number of students, we need to look for placement outside our district. You saw it tonight. Even though our total special education students is at a higher number than other districts, our number of out-of-district students is lower than our comparisons, which I think is a great strength. Average tuition here, you can see that really been keeping pretty steady on the total number of students. I don't see much difference between 49 and 53. That isn't a growth, that's really stasis here, and that's a good solid number. We also, as you can see, these costs can vary quite a bit depending on the needs and placement of the student, where they're placed, what their needs are. But you can see also keeping a pretty steady number year to year since FY19. Add to tuition budget, you see we're anticipating a small decrease, but that is tied to the reimbursements from Circuit Breaker. Circuit Breaker is the funding from the state that reimburses us for significant costs beyond the sort of typical student average. I'm not sure Gary or Katie, if you want to add anything to this, if you want the piece you want to highlight, Gary. One thing I might highlight for the new members is typically we've been in a pattern, the second row here, prepaid tuition, of paying in advance for tuition costs from one fiscal year to the next. And we can prepay those tuition costs, and we're allowed to do, and we do it. And part of the reason we're doing this is because we've been doing it for a while. And if we don't do it, then those costs have got to still be paid in the upcoming fiscal year. Okay, if you don't pay them, maybe this is where you should take over. We have to pay them. Okay, if we stop paying them in this existing fiscal year, then we get a double payment the next year. Okay, which would literally cause significant issues in our budget. But it's ultimately, let me stop there. Anything to add, Gary?
Yeah, I just want to add the tuition contingency of 500,000. That's in case there's move-ins or a student needs to be placed currently in the district, but has to move out to receive better services outside the district. And so that contingency is there in case our cost increase.
We have a very limited number of contingencies in our budget. This is one of them. Address transportation is another one, and the school committee contingency. Those are really the extent of them. But as Gary says, and this is a very common practice for special education tuition and transportation contingency. Most districts do it because, as Gary said, and Katie can attest to, they will. It varies year to year, and we can be on the hook for next year for students who are placed later this spring, students who come from other districts and are placed here later this spring. A small number of students can have a very high level of cost. So it's basically good, prudent budgeting to prepare just in case. We're going to circuit breaker. Don't need to go too deeply into circuit breaker right now. But I don't want to go through the calculations here, but what you should know is that it's one of the pieces of the district budgets that there's been quite a bit of consternation and advocacy around state reimbursement. It's probably the point of sort of biggest contention. And the result of many years of advocacy has resulted in the state now giving us higher reimbursements for that, especially for transportation. The state pays up to 75% of the costs that exceed the threshold. That's 4 times the state average foundation budget, per pupil. Okay, that means that if we have costs above $47,000 per student who has special needs, that the state will reimburse us for those costs above the threshold. They will get reimbursed for 75% of those costs that are above $47,000. Okay, that amounts to for us to be $1.5 million for next year, which is, and we work very hard to make sure we are submitting and then recouping those dollars. And it's really a reporting function. If we don't report that well, we won't get that reimbursement.
So I was just doing, again, as you said, Ben, I don't want to get too much into this right now, but it is kind of interesting, just doing the math on it, and I'm like, well, we got 53 students out of district, and we spend a little over $4 million. And am I correct in stating that the circuit breaker, the state pays up to 75% of that? Or, so I did the math on that, that comes out to like $76,000 a kid or whatever it is, or a student. And, but the state's picking up a certain percentage of that, is that?
They're picking up, so that average, okay, and just so you know, the out of district tuition students can vary really widely.
Right.
So you can vary to well over, that $75,000 average or well below that. I mean, it's really a big span.
Right.
But what's key here is on the slide right here is that we'll get reimbursed. So for example, if a tuition costs $75,000, we'll only get reimbursed for the amount that's above 47.3.
So we're paying 47.3 regardless.
Exactly.
Unless it's less of a cost for
Unless
tuition,
it's, sorry.
unless it's less of a number than
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
for
right.
tuition.
So if the tuition cost is above that, we pay the 47, and after that, we pay 25% of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that?
That clarifies it for me and comes up, it makes sense to me.
You're just trying to explain circuit breaker too much at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think every year I need you to like re-explain this, so.
Just one last circuit breaker thing for Gary, but I know there've been years where the circuit breaker money has been delayed or it doesn't come on time. How's that been going? Like, does the circuit breaker money come?
Yeah, the circuit breaker, can you go back to that one slide?
That one?
Yeah. So look at the prior year underlined and bolded. So that means that our claims are the prior year and we're getting the funds in the current year.
Right.
So if we have a new student,
Right.
we have to wait an entire year before we receive any funding.
But are they still coming for the previous? I mean, are they coming on time? No?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I just remember hearing that there were some issues around that.
they've been good on paying on time.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the key points I just wanted to mention was the prior year.
Sure.
Yeah, so they're on the books, even though we're not really getting anything, we're getting anything till next day.
To the next year, correct.
Even within that number 53, there's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
There's students that we are able to pull back in within the district, and then there's other students that go out, so that number is not always the
Yeah.
same students
Kind
or
of a
always
fluid
the same
number.
It's
amount.
fluid. And I work with Katie, we talk every week and to see how the changes occur.
Got it.
And in
There
terms,
constantly.
yeah, and in terms of that, circuit breaker, Rosalie Ferrara is a huge piece of this in terms of keeping these two connected, but also, really, I mean, like I mentioned, the tracking record, keeping the reporting to get the circuit breaker reimbursement is crucial. And Rosalie plays a big role in that.
Yeah.
The last piece, and again, this is, high level math, but is another big change is that and this is because of advocacy of school committees and others, is that they've increased and now reimbursing for out of district transportation costs, okay? This program is even more complicated, but the important piece is that for next year, that 50% of eligible costs for transportation are being reimbursed. Then FY '24 will be 75% of eligible costs, and then FY '25, 100%. Now, the key term there is eligible costs, not all costs, eligible costs, okay? And the eligible costs, again, are a percentage of that. But it helps quite a bit, and as we talk about, this is transportation for out of district transportation is an area, certainly an area that's going up quite quickly. There are less companies involved in it, and so competition is going down while the need is going up in many places, and so that of course means that supply is going down and demand is going up, that prices go up as well. So it's one of the reasons that we'll start looking with BNF next week in more detail at the dollars and cents around us taking on some of our district transportation, and see if it makes sense financially for us to do that. And then you can see circuit breaker funding. So is this the reimbursement or this is what was incurred?
Reimbursement.
Yes. So this is the revenue we're getting, the reimbursement we're getting from the state. As you can see, growing, but it fluctuates year to year pretty significantly. And of course, that is of course based on the number of students and the level of tuition that we have above that threshold, because that fluctuates as well. In terms of significant adjustments to the budget, so these are the major categories where we see adjustments. So, not within line items, but some of the bigger players here. So the salary increases for teachers, as I said before, $950,000. Support staff salary increases, and that's across, transportation, food services, secretaries, supervisors, paraprofessionals. So professional development shift, so that's the shift downward. We're moving dollars over to ESSER because we're opening up dollars in ESSER. Okay. We're also bringing those ESSER provisions onto the operating budget, as I described earlier. We have our insurance increase in there. As we also mentioned, the decrease in the out-of-district tuition budget, and then also transferring some paraprofessional positions to grants as well. And some places, a small number of reduction positions, not through that we don't need anymore. Those are happening through attrition, I believe. Those are things I summarized in earlier slides. Most of those. The upshot of that is a $1.35 million increase in the budget for this we're recommending to you, an increase to the budget. We'll put that in some perspective here. Actually, we'll look at, we'll get to that, what that means in terms of historically in a few slides. But these are the categories we've gone over earlier and just put some dollars to summarize that on this table here. These are federal grants. So they're title grants you see down below. Title II, Title I for low income grants. These are federal grants. The Perkins vocational educational ones. The ones sort of from individual with disabilities and below, so sort of partway, about halfway and down, are entitlement grants that we get every year from the federal government for different purposes. They're earmarked for different, so English learners for Title III, professional development for Title II. Okay, you can see those aren't changing much. Okay, we don't anticipate those to change much. And if anything, they may go down a little bit net. The difference here is, and we also see a few different changes here. The earlier, we see some increases with ARPA money, and then we see a decline in some ESSER dollars, ESSER 2, but a big increase in ESSER 3. So those are the ones related to COVID. The ones we see increase are all related to COVID. The ones that are pretty much staying the same are sort of annual federal grants that we sort of get every year. Budget by department, you'll see these. If you think of across our whole budget, we're getting $1.35 million increase, or recommending one, I should say. That's on the bottom line here. That's a 2.96% increase. So what I looked for here, or what we look for, is like which of these are much higher, much lower than that average, 2.96% increase. High school, that's simply some salary adjustments. So we saw an increase in teacher salaries and paraprofessional salaries, so they just have more staff there. We're getting those increases. This is also lane changes as well. We have salary lanes, and so we expect more salary lane changes at the high school than other schools. Then the other ones, transportation, as we mentioned, district transportation continues to go up. That's what the increase there, why it's that 9%. The decrease in professional development is because we're moving some professional development costs onto grants and off the operating budget. And athletics, the increase there is we talked about already in terms of the increase in athletic pay. That's all athletic stipends, which we the committee very purposely increased at a pretty high rate. But here's the sort of draft budget summary. Going from $45.6 million off the operating budget to just shy of $47 million, a 2.96% increase. If we look at the past number of years, so really since FY20, you see FY16, a level very similar to what we're requesting now. Then FY17, 18, 19, we're a little bit lower, and then really have been in the same ballpark since FY20 in terms of percentage increase. And we always like to look again at our comparison districts. So these are again our DART and neighboring districts, just like the same comparison districts we compared to early time of specification. As you can see, we're sort of right in the middle there and very close to state average. That's where I think we want to continue to be. It isn't always about more and more dollars, it's really about what you're doing with those dollars. I want to make one point here. We often focus a lot in school budgeting on this number, the increase, oops, sorry, that increase. But as you can see, that's 3% of our budget. What really matters is how we're spending how we're spending those dollars matters a lot, don't get me wrong. But what's more important is how we're spending the 97% that is there every year. Okay, and that's where we talk about, the identification of the three priority areas that Katie talked about. How do you better evaluation and assessment of our special education students? How do you make sure they're getting the targeted intervention they need, targeted support they need? How do you do professional development, and how do we adjust the professional development, from one area to the next that Greg leads? So how do we make sure that we're doing curriculum review at elementary, which we're doing very well, but now at the middle school, okay? And that's all the money that's in the 97%. How do we help support our teachers to do a better job, and all our staff, with better support, better training, better clarity, and that sort of thing. Better systems. So that's what I always like to talk about, is just like, it isn't just these dollars here, the increase, it's really making sure we're doing the things to make sure all the money is spent well. A few places that we're still working on. We're still looking into it and considering possibilities around supporting and strengthening O'Malley. Considering possible schedule changes there. Principal B is working and looking on, and we'll be working with our leadership team on that. Instructional technology will be talking to BNF next year. We have built a significant infrastructure on technology over the years. COVID really accelerated that in many ways, obviously. And something we've got to grapple with, wrestle with, and plan out over multiple years. And want to make sure you're involved in that and aware of that. But the sort of annual operating costs of all of that have shifted quite a bit. We developed, for example, here, tech labs for our different engineering programs, robotics programs. Those need to be, or 3D printing programs at O'Malley. Really great programs, but those come with them replacement costs. Our Chromebook come with replacement costs. And while in the past, those could have been considered as sort of capital expenditures or equipment expenditures, they're becoming operational expenses because they need to be replaced on a timely basis or renewed on a timely basis. Another area we have is software licenses. We moved up towards a lot of software licenses, and those need, in the past, when they were can be considered sort of one-time purchases, at this point, they're sort of more on an annual basis. So those are shifts that have been happening, and want to make sure that we're looking into them and want to make sure that you guys are aware of them. As we've talked before, English learners, just trying to make sure we have the proper support or can allow for the proper support of our English learners during the school year. Ongoing capital planning we're doing with Mike Hale and the Department of Public Works. And then another thing is curriculum instructional leadership. This is an area that really made the right choice last year to have a curriculum instructional coordinator at the middle school, and looking at, do we need some leadership, additional leadership in some areas, especially perhaps the high school. One other good example is as we roll out our ELA curriculum at assess and review and pilot ELA curriculum at both the elementary and middle schools. How do we make sure we do that well? That's a very significant investment, a significant change in practice, and we want to make sure we get it right. So again, areas we're looking at, and we'll come back to you with what we're working on, thinking about, and any changes we have to make because of these areas. So, let me stop there. There's other areas here for you to look at, just more as appendices, but we pause there and take a breath and see if folks have questions.
Yeah, I was just looking at the numbers for per pupil. It was 17,000 essentially. For the audit district, my calculations was 78,000.
Yeah,
that's for the 53 kids. That's quite a significant difference. Is that because they're special challenges that they have?
Yeah, I mean, Kate can talk more about this, but what I'll talk about is, special education, and supporting those kids and making sure they have a free and appropriate public education, in the least restrictive environment for what their needs are, is fairly guaranteed,
Yeah.
So it's an important thing for us to realize that, we have to support every and any child that walks in our public schools with what their needs are, and some kids need, all kids need, different supports and instructional, that sort of thing. Some kids need a whole lot more. But regardless of the cost, we're obligated to do that, and we should, so. But it is striking, those numbers are striking, they always are. But they're essential as well, for those children and their families. Katie, anything to add to that?
I was just gonna add, oftentimes those costs are higher because those are the programs that have a really high staff to student ratio.
Yeah,
Because that's
okay,
what's
that makes
needed.
sense.
They have additional therapeutic supports or related service providers to support in the areas that are needed within that school, whether it's medically fragile students that need more nurses or students that need more mental health supports, or it ranges, but it's very much, when we send students out of district, it's very much high staff to student ratio, and we're unable to meet their needs here, and they need that level of support. So, and some, we're able to bring some students back within the district. So it's very much a moving piece.
Thanks for the clarification.
It also includes transportation, those costs.
Yeah.
include transportation.
Okay.
I go back to one of your first slides, Ben, and I'm only going back to it because it kind of stuck out to me a couple times, and I've actually talked to a couple of school committee members about it, but you listed three things. What are your strengths and priorities? What do you need to know to execute? And what are you willing to let go?
Yeah.
And so I thought, we really haven't talked about what people are willing to let go. And so I kind of got to thinking, and just being on the school committee for 2 months, I'm like, I don't see what you can let go. I don't really see it. And then a couple of committee members said it's really in the details of the budget. You have to kind of get into the budget, kind of find those things. So I just in a general sense, any comments on that? What does that look like to you as far as what are you willing to let go?
Yeah, so a couple things, like last year our principals were really, really great at this. And part of it is looking at their staffing, looking at paraprofessionals sometimes, special education sometimes. It could be so there's sometimes you can look at staff, okay, and that might be reallocating. We haven't done this too much since I've been here, but one thing some folks will do is we haven't done it this year is if you have 2 paraprofessionals, but you could have a teacher instead. Okay, that's you're letting go of a paraprofessional, so to speak, quote unquote, but you're also then reallocating that to a teacher. Okay, and that can give you more flexibility in different services and support, both in scheduling and whole different ways. Okay, that's one way to let go of things. Another let go is a way of doing things. So something we're going to ask a whole lot of teachers, in fact, all of our elementary teachers, to let go of the way they've been doing things in English language arts. Okay, to take on something that is quite different but will be quite a bit better for our students, more engaging. We'll get them better prepared for middle school, that sort of thing. So there's both practice and program letting go, and also maybe resource letting go. So another resource letting go could be an ordinary expense on, let's say textbooks, but you guys can help me out here if you want.
Right, you're doing just fine.
You're letting go of a technology thing, you don't need another screen, or you don't need that sort of thing.
You don't need to make as many copies.
Right, you might be letting go, we're using less paper and that sort of thing. So there's some letting goes there. But really what we want to get to is, and listen, I think we've been doing quite well here, since before I was here, on assessing the quality of programs, especially the elementary schools, okay? And moving on from things, towards, like the math program, from Reading Streets to the next thing we're gonna, select later this spring, So I think there's actually been quite a good process of, moving on from, let's start 360 replace.
A number of things, easy CBM was one of the things that replaced.
Yeah, so these are some of our benchmark assessments. So moving on from assessment tool that really wasn't doing what we wanted it to, something that really is doing what we wanted to do.
Right.
So that's a letting go.
Right.
So it can be, it can be positions, it can be programs, it can be practices, that sort of thing.
And it doesn't necessarily, to me, it doesn't necessarily have to have a financial piece of that puzzle. It could be something that, on the lines of programs. It's funny because I almost asked Katie in her presentation, well, how do we evaluate, in the special ed community, how do we evaluate, new stuff? Or, that's a constantly changing dynamic. And there's new stuff coming on board, new techniques, new programs. And you don't have to answer it now, but I guess what I'm saying is that, what are we doing to evaluate? And when we say let go, it doesn't necessarily mean financial. It could be for the betterment of what we're offering, I guess is what I'm saying.
It's all about the positive student outcomes
Yeah.
and looking at student growth. So we looked at some general data tonight, but looking at student growth more on an individual level with the assessments.
Yeah. Interesting.
I've said this to Ben during the early process of the way he approaches the budget, just that framing of those conversations with his principals and department heads really gets them to examine what they're doing, not what they're spending, right? And through that, are they doing things that aren't having the outcome or the results or whatever? So I think these conversations are all about, as he says, the 97% of the budget, not what the increase.
right.
It's like, what are we doing and are we doing it the best we can? So
Absolutely.
I think it's a very reflective way to look at it all.
And you'll really get a good look into our assessment of practices later in the spring when Greg brings forward the work that we've been doing late spring on assessing the ELA curriculum at the elementary schools.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing the same process, the middle school, first for math, we're starting, ELA we're starting, and then we're doing math, right? And you really get a look at the in-depth work teachers have been doing to pilot 2 different programs, assess their value, compare what we were doing before. And they're going to be a really robust process where they will essentially, working on that decision with Greg's leadership. The good news is both groups are really, I would say, I'm not sure I'm enjoying, but are excited about the thing they're piloting.
Right.
Which makes me we'll have a hard decision down the road, but that's a good decision to have to make, because they're excited about both approaches. So you'll see in depth how that works.
Yeah. Appreciate the answer.
All right, next steps on this are BNF will get the budget book, the detailed budget book. At the next BNF meeting next week, we're going to give folks a little preview of what the budget book looks like, just so you can sort of see what to expect in it, the parts, sections, components. We might do that with the full committee maybe at some point. That's helpful for folks who are new. And then that'll be looking at the current year's budget to educate folks, sort of preview. And then that full budget book comes to you in your March, the BNF in March meeting. At that point, the whole community will have access to it as well. But as I said, especially in those last areas we're still working on, there may be adjustments and changes, and we'll make sure that you're aware of those as we go along. All right.
Okay. All right. Okay. We will move on to the fiscal year 2022, 2023 school calendar.
You want to do this? Sure. All right. Thank you. I'll present it for you.
Okay.
Big help.
Yeah, you don't speak now. It's been quiet for a while.
I know.
All right.
It's on the screen there. Wait, oh, no, it's not. You can't see what I'm showing yet.
No.
Sorry.
There we go. That's fine. So next year's calendar is not, there's not a substantial change from a typical year, where we have Labor Day weekend falling early in September. We start before Labor Day. And that's this sort of a standard beginning. 29th would be the first staff day. It was it one day before school starts. And then we have a 3-day week of 30, 31, and 1. Just a couple details within that week. The kindergarten would go back to what we had done pre-pandemic, which is screenings first couple days, followed by half the kindergartners coming one day for a full day, and then the other half coming for next, and then a full start by September 7th for all kindergarten. These are things that we've done for a number of years, and we're back to. The things really to take a look at that are different from typical calendar would be that one, we're returning to the election day, November 8th, for staff professional development day. We had moved it up into September this year. I'm not sure if you recall, because of the primary election. It made sense to move it up there and then take November 8th entirely off, because we didn't know what we'd be looking at for COVID at that time. So we're back to that day, which is a traditional day. And then the only other real difference from any past year would be the Friday, the 23rd of December, is often a half day for the last day. It's also where we have our attendance is really tough on a half day shortly before the break. And with it falling on a Friday before the holidays, to us, it made more sense to take that Friday entirely off and make the Thursday a full day rather than a half day, which is typical to have a half day prior to the break, but just ends up in many cases being a day that people take off, students take off. So that Thursday would be a full day, Friday would be, the 23rd would be off. That adds one day to the break, but it still allows us to have a projected last day, not including any snow days, of June 13th, which is still pretty good for an end date in June. Other things remain essentially the same. Friday, and with the February vacations and the April vacations falling on the standard holidays. Yes.
Why is January 2nd off? It's a Monday, it's not a holiday.
I believe there's either contractual that if it falls on I think the Monday after the first, I could pull up that language.
I think it also would be, we actually be celebrating that holiday.
Yeah, the holiday's on a Sunday, so it would be.
So we have that
Really?
one contract, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be national, it's gonna be national holiday,
Oh, because of the national holiday.
because Sunday the 1st,
So Monday will be the national holiday.
is that right?
Right.
Second will be a national
Yes.
You'll get it too.
I don't.
I think it gets.
get it. No, so I don't believe it's a national holiday. We get, if a holiday is on a Sunday, we get a comp day. I believe that's how it works. We don't automatic, the Monday's not considered, as far as I remember, I don't, but I don't think I have it off, that's what I was asking. But I do remember that is in a contract
it's-
somewhere.
Yeah, I can't cite the exact language. Also, just generally speaking, I think it might make a good idea even if it weren't to have that Monday off with the first falling on that Sunday.
It's actually, I'm looking at the list of federal holidays and January 2nd will be a federal holiday in 2023. For this
It
week.
will be.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I only ask because we've had conversations in the past about how many days is unhealthy to be away from school, you know, so I was just adding up the total numbers.
Yeah, and
It's a holiday, it's a
I
holiday.
think we talked about that a lot when we were considering having 2 full weeks
Yeah,
off, but
right.
this ends up being
Less, yeah.
just a weekend and 2 long weekends.
So it's like, it's one more day we had this
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this year was the shortest year ever to have. Yeah, so, yeah.
And I think the reentry of a 4-day week as well is probably.
Yeah, that is true.
Especially in January.
Yeah.
Laura, I'm gonna look to you because in programs, we had some conversations around simplifying and streamlining the kindergarten start dates. And not separating them into 2 groups and really prioritizing getting them into school on the bus before all the older kids. And I do think there's some merit in having more conversations around making that feel a little less confusing, because it's,
Yeah, I understand that the principals really advocated hard for this because we do have to fit in the screening.
yeah,
So the alternative would be to get the kindergartens in before, but we don't have that option because everybody else is starting and we have to do the screening. The half and half, the principals really feel strongly that is very helpful for handling what's challenging for students on their first full days. It's hard to handle and do that well for a class of 22 kids and just to give them a really, really good experience with half the number. I understand that it's more confusing as a parent and we could probably do a lot better job of clearly communicating, group A, group B and doing that. But, certainly we could have a representative from the elementary principals group come talk to us about it.
yeah, or maybe I think we even talked about like improving the orientation so that it like includes transportation, so the first time the kids are getting on the bus isn't the first day of school, that kind of thing, like
Yeah.
just helping them orient in a nicer way than just jumping on a bus with a whole bunch of sports.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
I do think there's room for
Yeah,
improvement
so-
in the orientations.
So in one of our meetings that Gary and I had with Lori Francis, Treasury Director, and Cameron Locke, the manager, raised this, because obviously, they weren't here for the fall conversation, so they're very much aware and will continue to work on making sure that that's improved. On a variety of levels that we talked about. So they're in the loop on that, and we'll make sure that. But one of the ones we talked about, and I'm pretty sure, I think Lori or Kim had some ideas on this, is how do you course of transportation early on, so they get some real, so it's not just what we've done at.
Talked about it with the principals.
I know, but we count down, because I count down the kindergarten, we have them get on and off the bus, which is sort of like a fun thing, right?
Yeah.
So something that's more meaningful to that and more, related to how it's really gonna work, so. But that's definitely, top of mind, and aware of it, and Cameron and Lori are also as well, and then as Kay was saying, you were saying that principals are also talking about it.
talked about adding that to the principals when we were planning for the transition. What's the transition?
Yeah, and
Adding in a time for part of their time to be getting on and off the bus and practicing going for the ride.
Yeah, right.
And communication from the principals to each family. That whole process was so difficult last year, and so I think it's a transportation issue. I think it's also like principals to the new families, and just as much communication as we can do from every angle from that, I think would be helpful.
Thank
I'm absolutely aware of it, and have not forgotten a bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Put up one thing, which is, sometimes it's not clear to folks why we get the Friday off before Labor Day weekend. It's nice to have 4-day weekend, don't get me wrong, but that is in our GTA contract.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions? No. So the only thing I want to bring up is, so we know we discuss it and consider it, is the primary day, which is September 6th. So I'm just curious, have the principals talked about any major disruption? I know, well, if any of the principals talked about primary day being an issue with having school at the same time as people are coming in to vote.
At this point, I mean, it's never, you know, it's been reduced enough. So it's at a veterans, it's at GHS, and I think 3 others. Most.
So
East
they're going
Gloucester.
Veterans is going to.
West Parish.
It's not West Parish, and the high school.
They're gonna go to St. Anne's.
No, they, I can't remember where they moved into, honestly, because they moved out of our schools, or they moved, or just at the high school, I think. But no, it's not high school, it's gotta be within their district.
No, it was Veterans was at the Y last year. But this,
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I don't know if that's the arrangement still holds for this coming year.
And then particularly, you know, that primary day, you know, we don't expect it, it's not a high turnout primary day, you know. It's not, right, yeah, because of which year it is. So we're not that concerned about that impact. I think folks are more concerned about going to school later. Having those, starting off strong, so not having as many, you know, limiting as best we can, days off in September. You know, particularly if it's a day off, it won't have such a big impact on the schools, right? We just probably don't expect this primary to have that.
So what I was saying is that the high school, West Parish, and East Gloucester will still have people coming into the building when school is in session. And Beaman, well, yeah.
Plum Cove.
Yeah, I mean, that,
Well, Plum was only because the community center
during COVID.
they needed more space.
Was that final? Well, regardless, there's still multiple schools that can have it.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, what are we doing to sort of maintain safety during those times? I mean, I think that was always the concern. We got multiple emails from parents saying, you know, it's concerning to have people coming in and out of our buildings when our kids are there.
They're well organized, they're well managed, they're separate from the students. I understand that folks are concerned about that. I don't want to minimize that, but I can assure you that if our principals thought it was a significant security issue, they would let us know, and they don't believe that. So I want to minimize folks' concern, it's legitimate, but it's not something that's concerning to us. Folks who run the building and are responsible for the safety of the children.
So, does anybody have any other comments on that?
We know when the last day of school is yet this year.
Well, today we do.
Right, today.
It's June 20th. Because the June 21, it's the Tuesday, because Monday is a holiday. So until when we canceled school last Friday,
Right.
that moved us, we were already on a Friday, I don't know the date, sorry. That moved us to a Monday, the next Monday, but Monday's a holiday, which is we're on a Tuesday.
And isn't there a school that has to make up a day and a half?
That's TBD.
Summer, come back for one day.
Smart kids.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion to approve the calendar as
I
presented?
make a motion to approve the 2022, 2023 Gloucester Public School calendar.
Second.
Any more discussion? The roll call vote?
Mr. Minio.
Yes.
Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Mayor Verga.
Yes.
Ms. Watson.
Yes.
Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy.
Yes.
And Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
So now we will move on to subcommittee reports. We have a program subcommittee report from Chairperson Laura Lisa.
So I'll try to make this, it's been a long meeting, but so we had a extremely informative and interesting presentation from Attendance Works, who is the consulting group that we're working with, start digging into our attendance issues here in Gloucester. I sent everyone the presentation. There's a lot of information there. A couple of terms: chronic absenteeism is missing 10% or more days per year, and that's 18 days in a 180-day school year. Gloucester currently this year is at 36.1% of our students are chronically absent, which is quite a high rate. We don't have a rate for this year from the state, but last year the rate was 17%. And Gloucester's was 31. So we're looking at some issues. They brought into this conversation and this presentation why looking at absenteeism is so important. One quote I wrote down is, absenteeism is the canary in the coal mine. It's the signal for when a student's achievement starts to, it's a signal of inequity in student achievement. They brought, they did a lot of research on Gloucester absenteeism rates. And again, there's a lot of data here. One piece of data that I thought was incredibly important was looking at all the kids in categories. So not only chronic absenteeism, but at risk, from satisfactory up. In our kids in the at-risk category, kindergarten was the highest number of kids. And that was quite striking to me as we sort of look at how we want to dig into this issue, because obviously it's starting younger than I realized. And that data is in here. They really pointed to the fact that attendance is, attendance equals engagement. Like if you're engaged in school and you're feeling like you are seen and you are present, you're more likely to attend. There's so much here. Basically, we looked at all of these numbers. They talked about sort of all the data that shows that, what absenteeism means for student dropout rates, for, lack of achievement, for reading levels, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're moving into so what now? What do we do now? They took a look at our Gloucester Public Schools attendance policies, and they feel that they're misaligned for what the goals are of sort of effective, engaging policies that will encourage kids to come to school versus being punitive. Right, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're doing great.
There's just a lot of data here, and it's almost 10 o'clock. So, so just a couple of bullet points that they gave us as we start to rethink our policies. They noticed that we have a focus on truancy instead of all absences. So one important point about chronic absences is that it's excused and unexcused. Not just truancy. So they're saying that we are focusing quite a bit on truancy and not everything. That our policies are compliance driven and increasingly punitive with consequences versus having a problem solving approach. Third was we don't have provisions in our current policies for personalized outreach and engagement with students and families. And they pointed to the attendance failure policy at the high school as contributing more to students dropping out than them re-engaging. So there was a lot of meat there. We are planning to meet again on March 10th to start looking at the policies and seeing what we can start to do. One of the most, so we had categories of what are, there's barriers to attendance. There's all sorts of barriers. And I could mention some of those, illness, family issues, rapid transportation. There's so many. But one of the things they pointed out is that there's an average of 9 barriers to attendance for kids who aren't attending. So it's really about being holistic. There's not just like one thing happening for most kids. There's a whole bunch of things that are all coming together. And as we want to sort of, build equity in our schools and give every kid an opportunity to learn at their most, positive and highest level, tackling this is a huge issue for us. So we will have another presentation on March 10th, and welcome your questions and everything to give to Attendance Works, so that they can answer them, because they are moving. Greg and Attendance Works want us to move sort of quickly on this policy stuff, so we're in place for next fall to really start sort of ramping up what we want to do with the policy. Is it Keith and Bill? Does that?
Yeah, there was also an impetus for the training staff as well, in that timeline being difficult for us. And then doing that in a stepwise manner, I think was what this suggestion was.
Yep.
Two things the main takeaway for me was to remove the barriers that keep kids from becoming engaged learners. And that's critical. The other thing that really stuck out to me was the fact that even at the kindergarten level, if you get on that slippery slope of missing too much school, it extrapolates out over your public education experience. And it was eye-opening. And the other thing I think is that to keep in mind, it's excused, unexcused, and suspension. So unexcused can be everything from, hey, we're going to Disneyland for a week and a half. It's kind of a big one.
But they showed a calendar about, the way that, you take off one day the first week in March, and one day, if you have 2 days off every month, that adds up. You're quickly at risk or beyond. And so it really changed for me the way I was looking at it.
Yeah, me too. And I'm looking forward to continuing to be involved.
Yeah, I just have, when I was listening, one of the questions that stood out for me was around home visits. And as somebody who's done in-home family therapy, I feel like that is such an important approach to building relationships with families and sort of break down some of the barriers in communication. But they also said that the most important relationship between a family and the school is the teacher. And so I'm curious, and I'd like to know from Attendance Works how they go about home visits. Is it the teachers that do the home visits? Is it school adjustment counselors? How does that sort of roll out, and what kind of buy-in do they need from teachers? Because I'm assuming obviously that would require discussion and negotiations. I don't know, but that just seems like something that we would have to flesh out with staff. So just realistically, what does that look like? Because I think it's really important, but what are the first steps?
Just to piggyback on the home visit issue, it kind of raises a red flag to me because, with attendance, it's not always the student's fault for not being at school. And if parents are making decisions and then you're sending an employee of the schools to someone's home by themselves to have a potential hostile conversation, that doesn't sit well with me. So I was just curious to hear at some point what safeguards are in place if we have an employee go into a home to have a potentially difficult conversation in a family home. So I would just think about that as we move forward. I'm not saying I understand the purpose of the home visit. I think it can be productive. But in my world, I see all kinds of concerns with that. So I would just keep that in mind.
Potentially be putting them in a dangerous position, depending on what's going on in their house.
Exactly, or what's there, or who's there, as opposed to having them come to the school. If you can get them here. So I just keep that in your mind, because I'm not one that would just say, oh, just go to a home visit without knowing the history and background of the family, if the conversation could get difficult.
The kindergarten information to me is very interesting because kindergartners probably aren't the ones making a decision whether they're going to school or not.
I think that was part of why attendance works. You know, we talked about this when we talked about this before COVID, that this is gonna need to be like a full community family sort of re-education. Because of course, kindergartners aren't in control of anything, you know, and so this means like for families to be learning from pre-K is how I see it. How important school is, how much, you know, if your child is missing days of school, they're not learning to read at the same level as their peers. You know, there's just really basic building blocks that are not happening. And I think that's going to be partly just a communication, not just, it's going to be largely a communication and an engagement with families.
I think one of the, when Greg was a elementary principal a long time ago, the tardiness issue was a big issue. And I remember, you know, the back to school meeting and you know, giving the example. Imagine if you're the kid walking in, you know, you're the 6-year-old and you're walking into your classroom late. You know, I just think there's just so many powerful ways to kind of reach families that, particularly at the end, they just.
Do we file CRAs here? So. I mean, we'll probably put a mention to a lot of that, but.
All right, well, glad it's back on.
Tune in March 10th,
Yeah,
5
that's good.
p.m. Same bad time, same bad channel.
Okay.
reference.
All right, there was a personnel meeting, but it was executive session, so there's no report on that. Okay, so we have, we're moving on to action. And it looks like we have some very wonderful grants from the Gloucester Education Foundation. Without objection, shall we take them all together? Okay, we need to accept grants from Gloucester Education Foundation for $2,500 to the elementary theater at Beaman School, $2,500 to elementary theater at East Gloucester School, $20,000 to O'Malley Academy to support the after-school and summer programming, $4,000 to agriculture people and the environment to support grades 6 through 8 with established partner backyard growers. $4,813.25 to the Gloucester High School AP Environmental Science Program. $6,000 to support grade 5 and 6 families, students, staff, and partners in June 2022 for transition event. And the last one is $10,000 to STEM equipment, and that would be at Gloucester High School, I believe.
So
Second.
Okay, all right. Any discussion? Okay, all right, well,
Thank you.
yeah, excellent news.
Thank you.
Okay, so we need a roll call vote, right?
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Verga,
yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yeah.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
And still sharing.
Mr. Melvin.
Yes.
Just showing off that beautiful website.
There's a point to
A little
this.
bit more.
There's a point to this, I promise.
Okay, then we'll move on to the discussion and other communication and old and new business. Update on the East Gloucester Veterans Memorial School Building.
So we do have an update on that. We have a couple visitors for an update on that, and you can get to them by our new website, which you may have heard about tonight. If you scroll down on our brand new web homepage, there's a nice link to the East Gloucester Veterans Building Project website, and you'll notice that there's new video on that website.
Oh, my
Look at
goodness.
that.
And we're gonna give you, hopefully the sound will work here. Sounds good. Can you hear that?
Love it.
Got veterans stickers on it, principal, and director, that's on the big dog.
Oh.
Nice.
All right, we're here. Cool. It's okay if you want to get an update on everything that's happening. We're standing here as learning groups of the new elementary school.
Like they're recording.
We'll be in the cafeteria. Wonderful place to welcome you We are really excited because the building's finally beginning to take shape. Concrete is almost in, the foundation is not, and today, steel was delivered to the building, so they're all ready. Now, Amy. Now you can see how tall the steel beams are, and about how tall the building will be. Where the beams are going up now, or in the street going away. First grade on the first floor, second and third on the second floor, and fourth and fifth will be at the top of the building. Come on.
Fantastic.
I can't wait to see it.
I did drive by today
I did too.
to see it. Nice to see
Wow,
it
look at that.
on a vertical.
Look at that, in the snow.
That's great. I mean, I thought that was
Good
now.
stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
So with that, there is a meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock, February 10th, 5 o'clock. One of the items on the agenda is discussing and having the committee vote on the guaranteed maximum price agreement with the contractor. So
Going to be on budget and on time, on schedule, I should say. Just the actually important part about the steel going up is the steel deliveries. Okay, and those are, you know, one of the advantages of this site is that literally you take it right off the highway,
Yeah.
or right within 150 feet, or right within another 150 feet, and on the construction site. You know, typically you're going through a lot more neighborhoods, you know, for a longer period of time. And they're also staged, and so one of the important pieces here is minimize the impact on Webster Street, Webster Road. I'm sorry. And one of the doing that is the team is doing it is not to have those deliveries backed up on the street. The way they're preventing that is they're actually staging them at the Beverly rest stop, you know, the Shell station out there. And they're queuing up there. When they have to deliveries, they'll stop there. They won't have any more than 2 trucks come and deliver, so they actually pull right onto the site. So they don't actually pause on Webster Street. Yeah, so that's a good thing. And that's the biggest. I mean, there's often obviously noise during the day. You heard some of it on the video, but you know the real impact on a neighborhood is when you have trucks coming through and lining up and blocking traffic. And so they've done a nice job of preventing that. They also put out, the project team put out to the email address we do have to the folks, so they would know this is happening, starting on Monday. And also Dennis Basidi, who's the project manager, the on-site project manager, has developed a good relationship with folks in the neighborhood. And when they have questions, they know to come to him. And also his name and contact information is right there on the website as well. So he's done quite a bit of work and connected with members of the neighborhood. So and always open to talking things through with the folks there. So. Anything else? So one last thing is tomorrow at the building committee, we will get an update on all the different sort of checks and balances. That's not quite the right word. All the checks and balances that the owner, project manager, and the construction teams do to ensure quality as we go along. They have different checks along the way. That, when they're pouring concrete, they have outside company to verify the quality of it, and they're going to give us more information on how they do that, the different processes they have to make sure that that's a high quality and high execution.
all right. Anybody else have any new business they want to propose? Or does everybody have had enough, right? It's been a very good meeting, excellent meeting, a lot of really good information.
Second.
We need a vote, we got.
Minio.
Yes.
Ms. Burns.
Yes.
Mayor Verda.
Yes.
Ms. Watson.
Yes.
Ms. Mason.
Yes.
Chairperson Lancy.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Good night.
Yes.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for everybody that's staying in with us. Thank you for attending our meeting. Meeting is adjourned.